The dust motes dance in the fading golden light, settling softly onto empty beds and the crisp, white edges of unwritten pages. It is the quiet hour, that delicate space between the end of the day and the coming of the night. In the wooden barracks, a profound and gentle silence has settled over the men. It is not the silence of an empty room, but the heavy, breathing quiet of 100 minds drifting far away from this place. The air is warm, thick with the scent of boot polish, coarse wool, and the faint, sweet smell of the surrounding pine trees drifting in through the open windows. Tomorrow, the engines will roar to life. Tomorrow, the great steel tracks will bite into the earth, and the long journey east will begin. But tonight, time seems to have slowed, holding its breath in the amber light. Look down the long rows of narrow beds. You see them sitting there, these young men of the Fourth Panzer Army. Before they are soldiers, before they are part of a vast, sweeping tide of history, they are simply boys. They are farmers' sons whose hands are rough from the plow. They are clerks from quiet city offices, students who only weeks ago were turning the soft pages of library books, and young fathers who still remember the scent of their newborn children. Right now, their hands, which tomorrow will grip iron and steel, are holding pens. They are writing the letters that will travel back to the places they have left behind. Listen closely, and you can hear it. The soft, rhythmic scratching of pen nibs moving across paper. It is the sound of thousands of thoughts reaching across the distance, a desperate, quiet clinging to the lives they know. What do you write on the eve of such a vast and terrible departure? You do not write of the rumbling machines outside. You do not write of the creeping dread that settles in the pit of your stomach when you look toward the endless horizon. No, you write of small things. A boy with wheat-colored hair sits by the window, catching the last of the sunlight. He is writing to his mother. He tells her not to worry. He tells her that the food is good, that he has found a friend from a neighboring village, that his boots fit well. He asks if the apple trees in the garden have blossomed yet. He writes these simple words as a shield, to protect the woman who raised him from the cold wind of his own uncertainty. He seals the envelope, pressing his thumb against the paper, leaving a small piece of his heart behind in the fold. A few beds down, an older man, perhaps 25, rests his notepad on his knee. He is writing to his young wife. He stares at the blank page for a long time, the tip of his pen hovering just above the surface. How does he tell her how much he misses the sound of her humming in the kitchen? How does he explain the hollow ache in his chest when he wakes up and she is not there? Instead, he writes about the weather. He promises her that he will be home before the snow falls. He draws a small, clumsy flower at the bottom of the page, a quiet promise of return, a gentle lie spoken out of deep, profound love. There is a great, unspoken heroism in these letters. It is the everyday heroism of carrying your fears silently, so that those you love might sleep peacefully. As the sun dips below the horizon, the barracks are bathed in twilight. Shadows stretch and lengthen across the wooden floor. Someone strikes a match. The sudden flare of orange light illuminates a young, weary face, casting soft shadows beneath his eyes. He lights a cigarette, the smoke curling upward in lazy, silver ribbons toward the ceiling. He passes the match to the man beside him. They do not speak. There is no need for grand speeches or loud bravado here. In this quiet hour, comfort is found in the simple presence of another human being. It is found in the passing of a light, the sharing of a tin cup of water, the silent nod of understanding between two men who share the same unspoken fears. They are bound together now, not just by the uniforms they wear, but by the shared weight of the journey ahead. Outside the barracks, beyond the lit windows, the machines are waiting. The great metal beasts, the panzers, sleep in the cool night air. They sit in long, silent rows, their heavy armor cold to the touch. They are monuments of iron and engineering, towering and formidable. Yet, in the moonlight, there is a strange stillness to them. They are lifeless without the men. They wait for the morning, when human hands will wake them, when human hearts will guide them into the vast, dusty unknown. The contrast is haunting. Inside, there is soft flesh, beating hearts, whispered prayers, and the fragile ink of love letters. Outside, there is only the cold, hard reality of steel. Tomorrow, the two will become one. But tonight, there is still a boundary. Tonight, the men can still retreat into the quiet sanctuaries of their own minds. The night deepens. One by one, the lights are extinguished. The scratching of the pen slowly ceases. The letters are folded, tucked safely into breast pockets over beating hearts, or placed carefully in wooden footlockers to be collected by the morning post. Men lie back on their thin mattresses, pulling the scratchy woolen blankets up to their chins. They close their eyes, seeking the merciful escape of sleep. The barracks fill with the sound of 100 men breathing in the dark. It is a gentle, rhythmic sound, like the slow washing of waves against a distant shore. Sometimes, the rhythm is broken by a quiet sigh, the shifting of a restless body, or a mumbled word spoken in a dream. In their dreams, they are no longer in this wooden room at the edge of the world. They are walking down cobblestone streets in the rain. They are sitting at wooden tables, laughing with friends, raising glasses of dark beer. They are feeling the soft grass beneath their bare feet, feeling the warmth of the summer sun on the back of their necks. They are holding the hands of the women they love, burying their faces in soft hair, breathing in the scent of home. Sleep is a gentle thief, stealing them away from the reality of the morning. It wraps them in a cocoon of memory and hope. Outside, a lone sentry walks the perimeter of the camp. His boots crunch softly on the gravel. He looks up at the sky. The stars are scattered across the dark velvet of the night, bright and indifferent. They are the same stars that shine over the rooftops of his home. He stops for a moment, pulling his collar up against the slight chill in the air, and simply breathes. The air is so quiet, so perfectly still, that he can almost hear the turning of the earth. He looks out toward the east. The horizon is a dark, unbroken line. It is a vast, terrifying canvas waiting to be painted. It is the great unknown, stretching out for thousands of miles, a land of endless fields, deep forests, and sprawling steppes. It is a land that will test the limits of their endurance, a land that will ask more of them than they ever thought they could give. But the sentry does not think of the battles to come. He does not think of the roar of the engines or the blinding dust of the summer roads. He thinks of the quiet. He savors this fragile peace, holding it in his lungs like a precious breath. Back inside the barracks, the boy with the wheat-colored hair turns in his sleep. His hand rests over the breast pocket of his uniform, where the letter to his mother lies folded against his chest. Even in slumber, he protects it. It is his tether to the world he is leaving behind, a paper anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The hours slip by, soft and silent. The deep blue of the night slowly begins to bruise with the first, faint hints of purple and gray. Dawn is a long way off, but the night has reached its turning point. The shadows in the corners of the room seem to soften, blurring the sharp edges of the bunks and footlockers. There is a profound beauty in this lingering night. It is the beauty of innocence on the precipice. These men, sleeping so soundly under the watchful stars, are caught in a fleeting moment of grace. The world has not yet asked them to be anything other than what they are, sons, brothers, husbands, friends. Let them sleep. Let them wander in the quiet fields of their memories. Let the letters in their pockets carry the weight of their love, safe from the coming storm. The engines are still cold. The steel is quiet. The world is at peace in this tiny, wooden corner of the earth. The gathering of shadows is complete, wrapping the camp in a protective embrace. And as the night stretches on, holding its breath before the dawn, there is only the gentle rise and fall of sleeping chests, the quiet beating of human hearts, and the soft, whispered promise of the memories they carry into the dark. The world behind them simply faded, swallowed whole by a rising cloud of pale, summer dust. When the morning finally came, the fragile quiet of the barracks was left behind, replaced by the deep, rhythmic heartbeat of 1,000 waking engines. The men climbed into their wagons, hoisted themselves onto the warm iron flanks of the great machines, and began to move. It was a slow, deliberate turning of wheels and tracks, pressing into the dry earth, carrying them away from the borders of the world they understood. At first, there was only the gentle sway of the road, the comforting vibration of the engine traveling through the soles of their boots and settling in their tired bones. The sun rose higher, casting a gentle warmth over the columns of men and steel. But as the hours stretched onward, the landscape began to change. The familiar enclosures of dark green forests and winding valleys slowly gave way to something else entirely. The earth opened up. It did not just open, it spilled outward in every direction, an endless, rolling ocean of tall grass and dry soil beneath a sky that suddenly felt too large. There were no mountains to break the horizon, no familiar church spires to anchor the eye, no gentle hills to hide what lay beyond. There was only the vast, sweeping plains of the east, stretching out until the blue of the sky melted into the gold of the earth. And then, there was the dust. It did not come all at once. It rose slowly from the dirt roads beneath the grinding tracks and the heavy marching boots. At first, it was just a faint, hazy mist lingering around the wheels. But as the day deepened, the dust climbed higher, carrying on the gentle, sweeping currents of the summer wind. It rose like a soft, powdery tide, wrapping the entire army in a pale, earthen fog. The dust was a living thing. It settled over everything, softening the harsh, dark edges of the iron machines, turning the towering panzers into ghostly, pale leviathans drifting through a dry sea. It sifted into the creases of uniforms, turning dark wool into a muted, sandy gray. Look closely at the men walking alongside the machines. By midday, the dust has claimed their faces. It settles on their eyelashes, on their eyebrows, and the small, worried lines around their mouths. Young men, who only yesterday possessed the smooth, unblemished skin of youth, now look like ancient statues carved from soft, tired clay. The dust masks their individuality, blending them together into a single, moving river of weary travelers. Yet, beneath those masks of chalky soil, the human heart beats on, steady and quiet. The heat of the summer sun beats down, not with a sharp, angry sting, but with a heavy, sleep-inducing weight. The air is thick and warm, rippling above the metal hoods of the trucks. The men walk with their heads bowed, the brim of their caps pulled low to shield their eyes from the blinding glare of the white sky. Their footfalls fall into a hypnotic, swinging rhythm. Left, right, left, right. It is a slow, walking dream. The sheer scale of the landscape surrounding them begins to press against their minds. You can walk for hours, an entire day, and when you look up, the horizon has not changed. The distant tree line you saw at breakfast is still just a distant smudge by the time the afternoon shadows begin to lengthen. It is a beautiful, terrifying vastness. It makes a man realize just how small he truly is. Out here, a human life is no larger than a single seed drifting on the wind. A young soldier, walking with his rifle slung lazily over his shoulder, wipes the back of his sleeve across his brow. The fabric is rough, and the dust is gritty against his skin. He parts his dry lips, tasting the earth on his tongue. It tastes like chalk and old sunshine. He reaches for the metal canteen swinging at his hip. It is warm to the touch, heated by the relentless sun. He unscrews the cap and takes a slow, careful sip. The water is tepid, tasting faintly of tin, but to his parched throat, it is the sweetest nectar in the world. He does not drink deeply. He stops, recaps the canteen, and looks to the man walking beside him, a slightly older man, whose shoulders are slumped with the heavy burden of the march. The younger soldier does not say a word. He simply holds out the canteen. The older man looks at it, then looks at the boy. Beneath the heavy layer of dust on his face, his tired eyes soften. He takes the canteen, nodding once in a quiet, profound gesture of gratitude. In this endless, shimmering heat, under a sky that offers no shade, this small exchange of warm water is an act of pure grace. It is a silent promise between two souls adrift in a sea of grass. I see you. You are not alone. The march continues, an unbroken ribbon of men and machines trailing into the hazy distance. The rumble of the engines is muffled by the thick curtain of dust, turning the sound into a low, soothing drone, like the hum of 1,000 bees in a summer meadow. The men let their minds wander to escape the heavy, oppressive heat. A driver, his hands resting lightly on the vibrating steering wheel of his truck, stares through the dusty windshield. The rhythmic bumping of the wheels over the rutted earth lulls him into a waking slumber. In the swirling dust ahead, his mind paints pictures of home. He does not see the endless steppe, he sees the cool, damp stones of his village square. He remembers the smell of rain on the cobblestones, the deep, refreshing chill of the evening breeze blowing through the valley. He remembers the soft, flour-covered hands of his mother as she kneaded dough at the kitchen table. The memory is so vivid, so fragile, that he is afraid to blink, lest it shatter and leave him back in this blinding, dusty reality. He holds onto the image of the cool kitchen, letting it wash over his tired mind, a gentle balm against the relentless sun. As the afternoon wears on, the light begins to change. The harsh, white glare of the midday sun softens, melting into a rich, liquid gold. The dust that hangs in the air catches the light, turning the entire world into a glowing, amber haze. It is a breathtaking, melancholy beauty. The dust motes dance and sparkle in the slanting rays, floating like tiny embers above the dry grass. Finally, the order is passed down the line. The engines, one by one, cough and fall silent. The sudden absence of the rumbling metal is startling. A profound, ringing quiet rushes in from the vast plains to fill the void. The day's march is done. The men slide down from the vehicles, their legs trembling slightly from the long hours of vibration and walking. They move slowly, their bodies heavy with exhaustion. They unbutton their stiff collars, letting the evening air touch their skin. The air is beginning to cool, bringing a gentle, sweet relief to the sunburned earth. Canvas buckets are brought out. A precious few drops of water are splashed onto rough cloths. The men begin to wipe away the day. Slowly, as the damp cloth works across their faces, the masks of dust are lifted. The humanity returns. You see the pale skin around their eyes where their goggles rested. You see the flush of the sun on their cheeks. You see their youth again. They gather in small, quiet groups in the tall grass. There are no fires tonight, the warm air does not demand it, and the sheer exhaustion in their bones asks only for rest. They open their tin rations, eating slowly, savoring the small comforts. They sit cross-legged in the grass, brushing the dust from their knees, watching the sky. The sunset on the steppe is unlike anything they have ever seen. Because the horizon is so flat, so impossibly far away, the colors bleed across the entire dome of the sky. The sky turns a deep, bruised purple, streaked with vibrant ribbons of crimson, orange, and bruised pink. The clouds, high and thin, look like feathers painted with fire. A soldier pulls a small notebook from his pocket. The leather cover is already coated in a fine layer of grit. He brushes it off with his thumb and opens to a blank page. He looks at the staggering beauty of the burning sky, and then he looks back down at the paper. "My darling," he writes, his hand moving slowly in the fading light. "I cannot describe the size of this world. We are sailing across an ocean of dry earth. The dust is in our clothes, in our hair, in our very breath. It feels as though we are walking to the very edge of the earth. But tonight, the sky is beautiful. Tonight, I watched the sunset, and I knew that this same sun was slipping down behind the trees in our garden. I look at the western horizon, and I know that you are there, just beyond the edge of the world. It is the only thought that gives me peace." He closes the book, holding it against his chest. The light finally fails. The golden dust settles softly back onto the earth, covering the tracks and the footprints, as if trying to erase the presence of the army entirely. The vast, indifferent night slowly claims the steppe. The men lie down in the grass. Some sleep on the flatbeds of the trucks, others simply roll themselves into their blankets on the ground, cradled by the very earth they have marched across all day. The grass whispers around them, a dry, papery sound in the gentle night wind. They look up. The stars out here are terrifyingly bright, a thick, diamond dust scattered across a sea of absolute black. There is no city light to dim them, no tall trees to hide them. The heavens are wide open. Lying there, swallowed by the immense, quiet dark, the men feel the true weight of the distance they have traveled. The world they knew is gone, lost somewhere behind the dust and the setting sun. They are floating in the vast unknown. But as they close their heavy eyes, breathing in the cool night air, they are comforted by the gentle sound of the men sleeping around them. The quiet, rhythmic breathing of their brothers. It is a soft, persistent chorus in the dark. It is the sound of life, holding on, enduring, resting beneath the wide and lonely sky. The dust has settled, the wind has quieted, and the long, deep sleep of the weary begins. Time did not move in days anymore, but in the slow, sweeping turn of the seasons across a sky that never seemed to end. Weeks have melted together, softening the edges of memory, turning the bright, harsh summer into a fading, golden haze. Out here, on the vast and open plains, the calendar has lost all meaning. There are no church bells to mark the Sunday mornings, no gentle chimes of a town clock to divide the hours of the day. There is only the steady, hypnotic rhythm of the march, the low hum of the engines, and the rolling earth stretching outward into infinity. If you walk alongside them now, you can feel a subtle shift in the air. The heavy, suffocating heat that once pressed down upon their shoulders has lifted, carried away by a new, restless wind blowing from the deep north. It is a cool breeze, carrying the faint, crisp scent of dry earth and distant rain. It whispers through the tall steppe grass, turning the ocean of summer green into a shimmering, rippling sea of pale yellow, bronze, and rust. The landscape is changing, preparing for its long slumber. In the distance, small clusters of birch trees stand like pale ghosts against the darkening soil. Their leaves, once bright and vibrant, have turned into fragile golden coins. With every gust of wind, they flutter and detach, drifting silently to the ground. It is a breathtaking, melancholy transformation. For the men, this sudden beauty brings a quiet, unspoken ache to their hearts. Autumn is the season of the harvest. It is the time of returning from the fields, of gathering apples in the orchard, of smelling the first sweet wood smoke curling from the chimneys of their homes. But here, there is no harvest to gather. There is only the horizon, a distant line that eternally retreats before them, pulling them deeper into the vastness of the world. You can see the journey etched into their faces. A profound and heavy exhaustion has settled into them. It is not the sharp, breathless fatigue of a single day's labor, but a deep, settling weariness that has seeped past their muscles and taken root in their very bones. The youthful spring that once carried them forward is gone, replaced by a slow, measured sway. They walk with their heads bowed, their eyes tracing the dusty boot prints of the man directly in front of them, lost in a quiet, walking dream. Their uniforms, once crisp and dark, have been bleached by the sun and worn soft by the miles. The leather straps of their gear have grown smooth, molding perfectly to the shape of their tired shoulders. They lean on their rifles like walking sticks, their hands rough and calloused. Yet, within this heavy exhaustion, a beautiful and quiet resilience blooms. They do not complain. The energy required for anger or frustration was spent weeks ago. In its place, a profound tenderness has grown between them. They move as a single, breathing organism, holding each other up through the long hours of the afternoon. Watch the young man stumbling slightly over a rut in the road. His knees buckle for a fraction of a second, his head nodding heavy with sleep. Before he can fall, the older soldier beside him simply reaches out, slipping a firm, calloused hand under his arm. He pulls the boy upright. No words are spoken. The older man just gives a gentle, reassuring squeeze to the boy's shoulder, a silent message that says, "I have you. You can lean on me." As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in soft shades of bruised purple and burning orange, the long column finally grinds to a halt. The sudden silence that follows the silencing of the engines is vast and ringing. It rushes in to fill the space, wrapping the men in a heavy, peaceful blanket. They ease themselves down into the tall, dry grass. Their bodies ache with a sweet, dull pain as they finally unlace their heavy boots and let the cool evening air soothe their blistered feet. This is the hour of small comforts. A time when the immense scale of the world shrinks down to the space between two men sitting on a canvas tarp. One soldier reaches deep into his rucksack and pulls out a small, canvas bag. From it, he produces a piece of dark rye bread. It is hard, dry, and older than he cares to remember. But to him, it is a treasure. He breaks it in half with a soft snap. He does not keep the larger piece for himself. He carefully examines the two halves, ensuring they are perfectly equal, and hands one to his companion. His friend smiles, a tired, dust-caked turning of the lips. He takes his tin cup, filling it with a little water, and together they dip the hard bread to soften it. They eat slowly, chewing in the fading light, savoring the simple, earthy taste of the grain. To them, in this quiet moment at the edge of the world, it is a feast. It is a communion of survival, a shared sacrifice that binds their souls together tighter than any oath. Further down the line, another man sits with his back resting against the cold iron of a silent transport truck. He reaches into the breast pocket of his tunic, near his heart. His fingers gently trace the edges of an envelope. It is a letter from home, delivered weeks ago before the roads turned to dust. The paper is no longer crisp. It has been read so many times that it feels as soft as old cloth. The creases are deep and fragile, threatening to tear with the next unfolding. But he opens it anyway, with the delicate reverence of a priest handling a holy relic. The handwriting is looping and familiar, the ink faded by the sun and the sweat of his own body. He does not need to read the words, he knows them entirely by heart. But looking at the shapes of the letters brings her closer. He traces her name with his thumb. As the autumn wind brushes against his cheek, he closes his eyes. He is no longer sitting on the endless step. He is standing in the doorway of his kitchen. He can smell the damp wool of the coats hanging in the hall. He can hear the soft, ticking rhythm of the clock on the mantelpiece. He can feel the warmth of her hand as she passes him a cup of tea. He holds the memory tightly, a fragile, glowing ember in his chest, shielding it from the encroaching cold of the evening. He folds the letter back into its perfect, worn squares, and returns it to his pocket, letting his hand rest there for a long moment before letting it fall to his side. As twilight deepens into night, small fires begin to bloom across the encampment. They are not roaring bonfires, but quiet, modest flames, built from dry scrub and the silvery bark of fallen birch branches. The wood snaps and pops, sending tiny, glowing sparks floating upward into the dark, mimicking the stars that are slowly appearing in the vast canopy above. The men gather closely around the heat, holding their cold hands out to the orange glow. The firelight dances across their faces, softening the harsh lines of fatigue, making them look young again. The shadows flicker and stretch behind them, dancing against the flanks of the silent machines. In the warmth of the fire, the silence is finally broken by soft, hushed voices. They speak in whispers, so as not to disturb the vast quiet of the plains. They do not talk of the march. They do not talk of the miles still left to conquer, or the rumors of what lies ahead. That world is too heavy to carry tonight. Instead, they talk of yesterday. A man with a thick, gentle beard tells a story about the bakery he ran in a quiet cobblestone town. He describes the exact way flour dusts the air in the early morning sunlight. He talks about the smell of yeast, the warmth of the brick ovens, the perfect, golden crust of a freshly baked loaf. The men listen with their eyes closed, letting the warm, fragrant imagery wash over them, their mouths watering at the phantom memory of fresh bread. Another man speaks of his daughter. He tells them how she used to hide in the tall sunflowers in their garden, her bright laughter giving her away before he even started to look. He smiles as he remembers the way her small hand felt wrapped around his own. These stories are a quiet magic. They are spells cast into the dark to ward off the loneliness. They share these pieces of their lives, passing them around the fire like precious gifts. In doing so, they build a temporary home here in the wilderness, a sanctuary of memory and brotherhood constructed from whispered words and shared longing. The fire slowly burns down, the bright yellow flames giving way to a soft, pulsing bed of red coals. The heat radiates gently, fighting a losing battle against the creeping chill of the autumn night. One by one, the voices drift into silence. The men pull their heavy woolen blankets tightly around their shoulders. They lie back against the earth, the dry grass rustling softly beneath their weight. They look up. The sky is a staggering dome of black velvet, completely saturated with the icy, brilliant light of a million stars. There are no clouds to obscure them, no trees to frame them. The horizon is swallowed by the dark, making it feel as though they are adrift on a small raft in the middle of a great and endless cosmic ocean. The wind sighs over the steppe, a long, soothing sound that carries the chill of the coming winter. But beneath their blankets, the men are warm. They are anchored by the quiet breathing of the friends sleeping beside them, by the half-eaten bread in their packs, by the soft, folded letters resting against their hearts. The endless horizon will still be there tomorrow, waiting for them in the morning light. The long march will continue. But for now, in the deep and peaceful dark, there is only the gentle embrace of sleep. They close their eyes, leaving the vastness of the world behind, and retreat into the quiet, beautiful landscapes of their dreams. The first breath of winter did not roar, it simply whispered across the steppe, turning the damp earth into unyielding stone. It happened in the deep, quiet hours of the night. When the men laid down to sleep, the world was still soft with autumn mud and the sweet, decaying smell of fallen leaves. But as the hours drifted by, the stars sharpened into icy pinpricks of light, and a profound, silent chill descended from the northern sky. When they woke, the world had changed. The puddles of yesterday were now perfectly still mirrors of dark glass. The tall, dry grass of the plains was encased in delicate sleeves of frost, shimmering like a field of shattered diamonds in the pale morning light. It was breathtakingly beautiful, this sudden, crystalline stillness. But beneath the beauty lay a quiet, creeping terror. The warmth of the world had been stolen away while they slept, and it was not coming back. Look at the great machines resting in the dawn. The panzers, the heavy transports, the supply wagons, they are no longer the roaring beasts of summer. They are cloaked in a heavy, white rime. The iron, which only weeks ago was warm to the touch, baking under a heavy summer sun, has become a cold and hostile thing. Frost blooms across the armor plating in delicate, fern-like patterns, a beautiful, icy lace woven by the dark. To touch the metal now with a bare hand is to feel the heat pulled instantly, violently, from your blood. The drivers and mechanics move around their vehicles with quiet caution. They wrap their hands in rags and spare socks. They build small, smoky fires in tin buckets, sliding them beneath the engine blocks to warm the frozen oil. They treat the machines not as weapons of steel, but as great, slumbering animals that must be coaxed gently back to life. When the engines finally turn over, they do not roar, they cough, a brittle, metallic sound that echoes thinly in the crisp, freezing air. The steel is beginning to surrender to the season. And then, the sky turns a pale, unbroken gray, the color of a dove's wing. The first snowflakes begin to fall. They are large, soft, and completely unhurried. They drift down in absolute silence, landing on the shoulders of the men, on the dark wool of their coats, on the cold iron of the trucks. Back home, in another life, this first snow would be a moment of simple joy. Children would press their faces against frosted window panes, hearths would be swept and fires lit, the smell of roasting chestnuts would fill the town squares. But here, on the edge of the endless, empty world, the snow brings a heavy, melancholic silence. It falls steadily, a soft, white curtain that slowly erases the horizon. The vastness of the steppe is swallowed by a swirling void. The tracks in the dirt, the markers of their long journey, are quietly buried. The snow muffles the sounds of the camp, turning the clinking of mess tins and the murmur of voices into distant, muted whispers. In the back of a canvas-covered truck, a young soldier sits with his knees pulled tightly to his chest. The canvas above him is stiff, frozen solid like a ship's sail caught in an Arctic wind. He is trying to write a letter. He has given up on his fountain pen, the ink froze solid in his pocket during the night. Instead, he holds a small, stubby pencil. His fingers are red, stiff, and clumsy. He blows on his hands, watching his breath form a pale cloud in the dim light, but the warmth vanishes in an instant. He is shivering, a fine, invisible trembling that starts deep in his chest and radiates out to his bones. He writes to his mother. He does not write about the distance they have traveled, or the sheer, terrifying scale of the winter descending upon them. He writes about the silence of the snow. He tells her how it covers everything, making the world look clean and still. He traces the shape of the letters slowly, concentrating on the memory of the porcelain stove in their living room. He remembers the exact shade of its dark green tiles. He remembers how he used to sit beside it with his back pressed against the warm ceramic, reading a book while the winter wind howled safely outside. He closes his eyes and tries to pull the ghost of that warmth into his shivering hands. He presses the folded paper against his cheek for just a moment, as if the love poured into the words could somehow keep the cold at bay. This is the new struggle. It is not fought with loud declarations or dramatic charges. It is a slow, silent battle against the plunging temperature. The heroism of the men changes its shape. It is no longer about marching great distances through blinding dust. It is about the immense, agonizing effort required simply to unlace a frozen boot at the end of the day. It is the quiet heroism of a soldier who takes his own thin, woolen scarf and, without a word, wraps it around the neck of a younger comrade who has begun to fall asleep sitting up in the biting wind. It is the sharing of a single, precious pair of dry socks. It is the way they look at each other, their faces wrapped in rags, their eyebrows coated in frost, communicating entirely through the soft, tired blinking of their eyes. The cold becomes a physical weight, heavier than their packs, heavier than their rifles. It settles deep into their joints. As the afternoon bleeds quickly into evening, the gray light fails entirely, and the long, terrible night begins. The darkness out here is absolute, and the temperature plummets until the very air feels brittle, as if it might shatter like glass if you spoke too loudly. They cannot sleep alone. To sleep alone in this vast, freezing dark is to invite the cold directly into your heart. They gather together beneath heavy tarps and the beds of the trucks. They huddle in tight, desperate circles, 5, 6, 7 men pressing their shoulders, their backs, their legs tightly against one another. They pool their meager body heat, trying to create a single, shared ember of warmth in the center of the freezing void. Beneath the stiff, icy canvas, the air is thick with the smell of damp wool, stale tobacco, and unwashed bodies. But to the men, it is the scent of life. In the pitch black, you can hear the synchronized rhythm of their breathing. It is a soft, comforting chorus, a gentle rising and falling of chests pressed together in the dark. When one man shifts his weight, trying to relieve the deep ache in his frozen hip, the others shift with him. It is a slow, gentle choreography of survival, a fluid adjustment that maintains their precious seal of warmth. Someone whispers a memory into the dark, a soft, tired recollection of a summer festival, of warm beer and the sound of an accordion playing under paper lanterns. A quiet ripple of laughter moves through the huddle. The laughter is fragile, barely more than a sigh, but it pushes back the dark. It is a reminder that they are still human, still alive, still dreaming under the ice. As they lie there, a profound and somber realization settles over the camp. The vastness of the steppe was daunting, the endless summer dust was blinding. But this cold is different. This cold is an ancient, indifferent force. It does not care for their marching orders, their uniforms, or their great steel machines. It is a heavier burden than any they have faced. It whispers a dangerous, seductive lullaby into their ears. It tells them to just close their heavy eyes, to stop shivering, to let their muscles relax and slip into the soft, white, painless sleep. It is so easy to drift away in the snow. But they hold on. They hold on to the memory of the green-tiled stove. They hold on to the pressure of the shoulder pressing against theirs. They hold on to the quiet, stubborn beating of their own hearts. Outside the canvas, the snow continues to fall, burying the tracks, burying the rusted iron, covering the earth in a seamless white blanket. It is a quiet, haunting, and deeply peaceful world. The frost upon the iron grows thicker with each passing hour, holding the giant machines in a frozen slumber. But beneath the snow, buried in the dark, the men are breathing. Their quiet resilience is a tiny, flickering flame in the immense winter night. They sleep wrapped in each other's shadows, dreaming of the spring, waiting out the long, gentle fall of the snow, held safe by the simple, profound warmth of the man beside them. There is a stillness at the edge of the world so absolute, you can almost hear the falling of a single snowflake. The great, rumbling march has finally ceased. The endless miles of dust, the heavy autumn mud, the turning of wheels and the grinding of tracks, all of it has ground to a quiet, breathless halt. Here, before the unseen gates of a distant capital, the forward momentum of the Fourth Panzer Army has been swallowed by the deep, prevailing winter. The engines are silent. The shouting has faded away. There is only the vast, unbroken white of the steppe, and a profound silence that stretches out to touch the horizon. To stand in this stillness is to feel as though you are the only living soul left on the earth. The snow falls steadily, not with the fierce, driving anger of a storm, but with a slow, gentle grace. It drifts down in heavy, intricate flakes, tumbling softly from a pale, iron-gray sky. It covers the scars of the earth. It covers the deep ruts left by the wagons. It wraps the sleeping, iron giants of the panzers in thick, seamless blankets of white, turning the formidable machines into soft, rolling hills that blend perfectly into the landscape. The men have carved their resting places deep into the frozen ground. The trenches and dugouts are no longer positions of war, they have become quiet sanctuaries, subterranean homes built to harbor the fragile flame of human warmth against the immense, indifferent cold. The walls of these trenches are hard as polished stone, glazed with a delicate, shimmering layer of white frost that sparkles faintly in the moonlight. Look down into the winding white corridor of the trench. A young sentry stands at his post, wrapped in so many layers of wool and canvas that his silhouette is soft and rounded. He leans against the frozen parapet, his chin tucked deep into the collar of his heavy coat. His breath rises in slow, rhythmic plumes, fragile clouds of silver vapor that hang in the freezing air for just a moment before dissolving into the night. He is staring out into the white void. The landscape before him is completely empty, a blank canvas of snow merging seamlessly with the sky. There is no enemy to watch for tonight, no movement to catch his eye. There is only the hypnotic, descending curtain of the snow. It is a haunting, beautiful isolation. The sheer emptiness of the world before him acts as a mirror, reflecting his own mind back to him. As he watches the snow fall, he does not see the freezing steppe. He sees the cobblestone streets of his hometown, slowly turning white under the street lamps. He sees the warm, golden glow of a bakery window, the glass fogged with the heat of fresh bread and sweet cinnamon. He remembers the feeling of stepping out of the biting wind and into a warm hallway, the sound of a wooden door clicking shut behind him, sealing away the winter. He remembers the soft, familiar embrace of his mother, the scent of lavender soap on her hands as she unwrapped the heavy scarf from his neck. He closes his eyes for a long, quiet moment, letting the memory wash over him. It is a gentle fire burning in his chest, a private, hidden warmth that the winter cannot touch. He smiles beneath his scarf, a small, secret curve of his lips in the dark. Below him, Beneath a heavy roof of earth and timber lies the dugout. You descend into it through a narrow, dark tunnel, leaving the sharp, biting air of the surface behind. Inside, the space is impossibly small, no larger than a farmer's root cellar, and the air is thick and heavy. It smells of damp earth, stale tobacco, coarse wool, and the faint, sweet scent of pine needles collected to make a weak, warm tea. A single, homemade candle burns in the center of the earthen floor. It is fashioned from leftover cooking fat and a piece of twisted string, but in this subterranean dark, it is a magnificent sun. It casts a soft, trembling orange light, pushing the shadows into the corners and illuminating the faces of the men huddled around it. They sit shoulder to shoulder, their knees pulled tight to their chests, wrapped in blankets, old shelter halves, and empty canvas sacks. They look like ancient, weary monks gathered in a hidden crypt. The exhaustion in their faces is profound, softening their features, washing away the hardened masks of soldiers and leaving only the gentle, vulnerable faces of exhausted boys. One of the men, a quiet corporal with kind, tired eyes, is holding a small, folded piece of paper close to the flickering light. It is a letter from his wife, arriving weeks ago on one of the last supply wagons to brave the deepening snow. The paper is incredibly thin, worn soft as velvet from being unfolded and refolded 100 times. The ink is faded, but he knows every loop and curve of her handwriting by heart. He does not read it to himself, he reads it aloud to the men in the dugout. His voice is a low, soothing murmur, barely louder than the crackle of the candle. He knows that his words are the only tether these men have to the world they left behind. He reads about the simple, beautiful things. He reads about how the ivy on the side of their house has turned a deep, bruised red in the autumn chill. He reads about the neighbor's dog that still waits by the front gate. He reads about the jars of plum preserve she has put up in the cellar, and how she has left his favorite chair sitting by the fireplace, waiting for his return. The men listen in absolute silence. They close their eyes, letting their heavy heads rest against the frozen dirt walls or onto the shoulder of the man sitting beside them. They do not hear the corporal's wife, they hear their own wives, their own mothers, their own sweethearts. The words float through the damp, heavy air of the bunker like a gentle spell, transporting them away from the frozen earth and placing them softly into the warm, sunlit rooms of their memories. For a few precious minutes, the dugout is not a hole in the ice. It is a parlor in a quiet village. It is a kitchen smelling of roasting meat and wood smoke. It is a soft bed with clean, linen sheets. The letter is an act of pure grace, a shared lifeline in the dark. When the corporal finishes reading, he carefully folds the paper along its deeply worn creases and tucks it back into the pocket nearest his heart. The silence returns, but it is no longer heavy or oppressive. It is a soft, companionable quiet, filled with the lingering warmth of the words. Another soldier, a young man who has not spoken all evening, reaches deep into the recesses of his heavy coat. His fingers tremble slightly as he produces a small, crumpled foil wrapper. He unwraps it with agonizing care, revealing a single, small square of dark chocolate. He has carried it for months, saving it for a moment when the world felt too heavy to bear. He looks at the square of chocolate, and then he looks at the men around him. Without a word, he takes a small pocket knife and carefully, meticulously, cuts the tiny square into 5 equal pieces. He places the fragments onto a clean piece of paper and passes it around the circle. Each man takes a sliver of the chocolate. They place it on their tongues and close their eyes, letting it melt slowly. The rich, sweet taste of cocoa and sugar blooms in their mouths, a sudden, blinding rush of flavor in a world that has tasted only of tin and cold earth for weeks. It is a microscopic feast, a tiny celebration of life. There is an immense, heartbreaking heroism in this small gesture. In a place where everything has been stripped away, where survival is a minute-by-minute struggle against the freezing dark, this young man has chosen to share his only treasure. It is a quiet refusal to let the winter freeze his soul. It is a silent declaration that even here, buried in the snow, they are brothers, and they will care for one another. The candle suddenly gutters, the small flame dancing wildly for a moment before drowning in its own melted wax. The dugout plunges into a soft, velvety darkness. No one moves to light another. The dark is welcome now. It is a heavy, protective blanket drawn over their tired eyes. The men shift their weight, sliding down against the earthen walls, entangling their legs and resting their heads against each other's shoulders. They become a single, breathing entity, a knot of shared warmth in the center of the earth. Their breathing slows, falling into a deep, synchronized rhythm that matches the slow, gentle pulse of the sleeping world above. Up on the surface, the snow continues its silent fall. The pale moonlight breaks through a rift in the clouds, casting a breathtaking, ethereal glow over the vast white steppe. The frozen trenches look like delicate silver threads woven into the fabric of the earth. The sleeping panzers are smooth, white dunes, completely at peace. The young sentry still stands at his post, an unmoving statue of frost and wool. He looks up at the moon, feeling the gentle touch of the snowflakes on his cheeks. He feels a strange, profound sense of peace settle over his heart. The distance to the unseen capital does not matter. The miles they have marched do not matter. The war, with all its noise and fury, feels like a distant, forgotten dream. Here, in the heart of the winter night, there is only the beautiful, haunting isolation. There is only the quiet breathing of his brothers beneath the earth, the folded letters resting over their hearts, and the sweet, lingering taste of chocolate in the dark. The silence of the snow is a gentle lullaby, wrapping the Fourth Panzer Army in a soft, white embrace. It whispers of rest, of forgotten embraces, of warm hearths waiting in the distance. And as the snow falls, covering the world in absolute peace, the men finally surrender to the dark, letting their minds drift away on the cold, beautiful wind, traveling the long, quiet road back to the homes they love. The hard, white edge of the world finally softened, melting into a quiet symphony of falling water. It did not happen all at once. Spring on the great steppe did not arrive with a sudden, triumphant burst of green. Instead, it came as a slow, weary exhalation. After months of holding its breath beneath a crushing weight of ice, the earth finally began to sigh. The heavy, iron-gray skies that had pressed down upon the men for so long began to fracture, revealing shy, fleeting glimpses of a pale, watery blue. And with the changing of the sky came the changing of the wind. The wind no longer carried the biting, invisible teeth of the deep frost. It brushed against the men's faces with a gentle, damp hesitation, like the touch of a familiar hand waking them from a long, terrible dream. Listen to the sound of the encampment. The brittle, echoing silence of the deep winter has been replaced by 1,000 tiny, rhythmic heartbeats. It is the sound of the thaw. Drip, drip, drip. Water falls from the stiff canvas edges of the tents. It runs in slow, glistening rivulets down the sloped armor of the silent panzers, washing away the delicate frost that had held the iron captive for so long. The great snowdrifts, which had looked like sleeping white mountains, begin to slump and shrink, their sharp ridges rounding off as they surrender to the warming air. As the white veil pulls back, it reveals a new world, a world of deep, endless, heavy brown. The earth, drinking in the melting snow, turns into a vast and seemingly bottomless ocean of thick mud. The roads vanish. The fields dissolve. The very ground beneath their feet becomes a dark, clinging mire that pulls at their boots with every step. For the mighty machines, this sea of mud is an impassable wall. The turning of wheels and the grinding of tracks only dig them deeper into the soft, yielding earth. And so, the great march is forced to halt once again. The army cannot move. But in this enforced stillness, there is a profound, beautiful mercy. For the first time in an eternity, the men do not have to fight the land. They do not have to march until their bones ache, and they do not have to huddle together in sheer terror of the freezing dark. They are allowed, simply, to stop. They are allowed to exist in the quiet, damp warmth of the spring. Look at them now, resting in the mild afternoon light. The sun is not the harsh, blinding glare of the summer, nor is it the distant, cold star of the winter. It is a soft, buttery yellow, casting a gentle, forgiving glow over the exhausted encampment. A young soldier sits on the broad, flat fender of his transport truck. His heavy woolen coat, which had been his only shield against the fatal cold, is unbuttoned and thrown loosely over his shoulders. His thick scarf is unwound, resting on his lap. He has taken off his helmet, and his hair is messy, plastered to his forehead with the sweat of the warming day. He closes his eyes and tilts his pale, winter-worn face upward, offering himself to the sky. He sits there in absolute stillness, feeling the actual warmth of the sun soaking into his skin. It is a sensation so simple, yet so profoundly magnificent, that he feels a sudden, tightening ache in his throat. The heat seeps past his damp uniform, sinking deep into muscles that have been coiled and tense for months. He breathes in, slowly and deeply, pulling the scent of the wet earth and the drying pine needles into his lungs. It is the smell of survival. It is the smell of life returning to the world. All around the camp, this quiet ceremony is taking place. Men are draped over the hoods of trucks, sitting on wooden ammunition crates, or leaning against the sides of the trenches, their faces turned like pale sunflowers toward the light. The heavy masks of the winter soldiers are melting away, revealing the tired, gentle faces of the boys beneath. They take the opportunity to wash. Tin cups and shallow helmets are filled with the abundant meltwater. They splash the cool, clear water over their faces, washing away the soot of the winter fires and the grime of the long march. Some produce small, battered mirrors and dull razors, carefully scraping away the thick, unruly beards that had kept their faces warm. As they wipe away the lather, they look at their own reflections with a quiet wonder, recognizing the youthful contours of their own cheeks and jaws, like old friends returning from a very long journey. In this beautiful, muddy pause, a wagon arrives. It does not carry ammunition or rations. It carries canvas sacks, worn soft and gray from travel. It is the mail. The distribution of the letters is a quiet, sacred ritual. Names are called out in hushed tones. Men step forward, their hands wiping nervously on their trousers before reaching out to accept the precious, folded squares of paper. These are not new letters. The winter had severed the lines to the world behind them, and these words have been traveling for a very long time, waiting out the blizzards in distant sorting rooms, inching their way across the frozen continent. They are ghosts from another season. An older soldier, sitting with his back against a birch tree, holds a small bundle of letters tied with a piece of frayed twine. The paper is deeply creased, the edges curled and slightly damp from the journey. He slides the top letter from the stack and carefully opens it. The date at the top of the page was written 4 months ago. He reads the looping, familiar handwriting of his wife. She writes to tell him that the first snow has fallen in their village. She tells him how the children helped her carry the firewood into the kitchen, and how she has knitted him a new pair of heavy wool socks for the coming winter. She wishes him a Merry Christmas, hoping that wherever he is warm, and that he will be home before the snow melts. The soldier reads these words while sitting in the deep, spring mud, with the warm sun beating down upon his shoulders. The disconnect between the world on the page and the world around him is a vast, echoing canyon. He feels a deep, poetic melancholy wash over him. He survived the terrible winter she was so afraid of. He lived through the freezing nights and the howling winds, but he did it without the socks she knitted, without the warmth of her fire. He traces her name at the bottom of the page with a calloused thumb. He feels the immense weight of the love pressed into the paper, a love that has traveled across time and snow just to find him here, sitting in the sun. He smiles, a soft, sad turning of his lips, and carefully folds the letter, placing it gently into his breast pocket. He carries her winter worry with him into the spring. A few yards away, 2 young men share a quiet moment on a wooden bench dragged from a ruined shed. One of them is reading a letter from his father. The father writes of the spring planting, of turning the soil in the fields back home, preparing for a harvest that the boy will likely miss. The young soldier looks up from the letter and stares out at the endless expanse of dark, churned mud that surrounds them. There are no seeds being planted here. There is only the churned earth of the steppe. He passes the letter to his friend. They do not speak. The friend reads the words, hands the paper back, and gives the boy's shoulder a firm, reassuring squeeze. In the silence of the spring afternoon, that touch says everything that cannot be put into words. It says, I know. I miss it too. We are here together. But as the sun warms the earth and the snow recedes, the thaw also brings a heavy, unspoken sorrow. The melting snow unveils the landscape, pulling back the pure, white blanket that had covered the scars of the winter. And as the earth reappears, the men are forced to remember those who did not make it to the spring. There are empty places in the camp now. There are voices missing from the evening chorus. There are coats that will not be worn, and boots that will not march any further. The men who succumbed to the deep freeze, who simply closed their eyes in the blinding snow and drifted into the long sleep, are left behind in the frozen earth. A sergeant walks slowly along the edge of the tree line. The mud pulls at his boots, making his steps heavy and deliberate. He stops near a small, rough mound of earth where the snow has completely melted away. Resting on the ground is a simple wooden cross, fashioned from 2 birch branches bound together with wire. Hanging over the cross is a faded, worn helmet. The sergeant reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, beautifully carved wooden bird. The man buried here used to whittle them in the evenings by the firelight, carefully shaping the wood with his pocket knife, dreaming of the forests of his childhood. The sergeant had found this last, unfinished bird in the snow outside their dugout. He kneels in the damp earth, indifferent to the mud soaking into his trousers. He places the small wooden bird at the base of the cross. He does not salute. He does not speak any grand words. He simply rests his hand on the damp wood of the cross for a long, quiet moment. He closes his eyes and remembers the sound of his friend's laughter, the way he used to share his last pinch of tobacco, the quiet courage he showed when the nights were darkest. This is the true burden of the thaw. The men who survive must carry the memory of the fallen forward into the light. They must become the keepers of the ghosts, holding the names and the faces of their lost brothers safely in their hearts, ensuring that they are never truly left behind on the empty steppe. The sergeant stands up, wipes his muddy hand on his coat, and walks slowly back to the warmth of the camp, carrying a little more weight in his soul. As the afternoon deepens, the soft yellow light begins to change, turning into a rich, liquid gold. The vast sea of mud catches the light, the puddles of meltwater reflecting the sky like a million shattered mirrors scattered across the earth. The world is a canvas of amber and deep, bruised brown. The men begin to prepare for the night. They do not have to huddle in terror of the frost tonight. They lay out their damp blankets over the hoods of the trucks to dry in the last rays of the sun. They open tins of meat and share pieces of hard bread, eating slowly, savoring the simple comfort of a meal eaten without shivering. Small fires are lit, not out of desperate necessity, but for the gentle comfort of the flame. The wood is damp, and the fires produce a thick, fragrant white smoke that drifts lazily through the camp, smelling of wet bark and earth. The men sit around the smoking embers, pulling the collars of their coats up against the mild evening chill. They bring out the letters again, reading them by the fading light. They share stories of home, their voices soft and low, blending with the gentle dripping of the melting snow. The stories are no longer frantic attempts to ward off the cold, they are peaceful reflections, quiet bridges built between the muddy steppe and the warm rooms of their past. The sky turns a deep, velvety purple, bruised with streaks of pink and orange. The stars begin to appear, pale and distant, a soft glittering dust scattered across the heavens. The wind dies down completely, leaving the encampment in a state of perfect, heavy peace. The men lie back on their ground sheets, resting their heads on their folded coats. The mud beneath them is soft and forgiving. They feel the residual warmth of the sun radiating up from the earth, a gentle, soothing heat that rocks them like a cradle. They close their eyes. Behind their eyelids, they do not see the endless white void of the winter. They see the ink on the creased pages of their letters. They see the smiles of the women they love. They see the faces of the friends they have lost, not frozen and pale, but laughing in the summer sun. The thaw has softened the earth, and it has softened their hearts. They are suspended in a fragile, beautiful moment of respite, resting in the muddy embrace of the spring. And as the dripping of the water slows, and the camp falls into a deep, rhythmic silence, the men of the Fourth Panzer Army drift away into a gentle, dreamless sleep, wrapped safely in the warmth of memory and the quiet promise of tomorrow. They walked into a dream of gold, swallowed whole by a million unblinking faces of yellow. The mud of the spring has long since dried, baking into a hard, cracked crust beneath their heavy boots, and the steppe has transformed once again. It is no longer a world of blinding white snow, nor a desolate sea of brown earth. It has burst open in a staggering, breathtaking display of life. As far as the eye can see, stretching out to the very edges of the curved horizon, the earth is covered in vast, unbroken fields of summer sunflowers. It is a surreal and haunting beauty. The flowers stand taller than a man's waist, their thick, hairy stalks rising from the dry soil to hold up magnificent crowns of vibrant, golden yellow. They sway together in the warm summer wind, a gentle, rippling ocean of light that seems to hold the very essence of the sun. Through this impossible garden, the long column of the Fourth Panzer Army moves. The great iron machines, so formidable and heavy, look strangely out of place here. They wade through the fields like weary iron beasts, parting the sea of yellow as they go. The thick stalks bow and snap gently beneath the white steel tracks, releasing a heavy, sweet, green scent into the air. The armor plating, once gray and imposing, is now dusted with a thick layer of fine, golden pollen. It settles on the barrels of the guns, on the fenders, and on the goggles of the men riding atop the hulls. The war machines have been painted by the steppe, softened and adorned by the fragile brushstrokes of the summer. For the men walking alongside the panzers, the march has become a hazy, walking dream. The heat has returned, but it is not the angry, biting heat of the previous year. It is a heavy, narcotic warmth that hangs in the air, thick with the smell of nectar and dry earth. It hums with the low, hypnotic buzzing of a million invisible bees. The soldiers move in a trance. Their eyes, accustomed to searching the horizon for danger, are now entirely filled with this blinding, joyful color. The sheer, staggering beauty of the landscape stands in quiet, heartbreaking contrast to the profound weariness in their hearts. When the world was frozen and hostile, their minds were focused only on the primal urge to survive. But here, surrounded by such delicate, overwhelming life, their emotional armor begins to crack. Beauty has a way of making the sorrow sharper. It reminds them of everything they are missing. It reminds them that somewhere, far away, the world is still tender, still growing, still bathed in the innocent light of a summer afternoon. Look at the young soldier walking on the edge of the column. His uniform is stained with sweat and faded by the sun, the ruffle coated in a fine, powdery yellow dust. He walks with his rifle slung loosely over his shoulder, his hands hanging heavy at his sides. As he steps forward, he lets his fingertips trail lightly across the large, soft faces of the sunflowers. Swish. 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 The sound of his hands brushing against the petals is a soft, rhythmic whisper. He closes his eyes as he walks, letting the tactile sensation anchor him. The touch of the flowers brings a sudden, vivid memory rushing into his mind. He remembers the small, walled garden behind his childhood home. He remembers his mother, wearing a canvas apron, her hands dark with potting soil, carefully tying the stalks of her own sunflowers to wooden stakes so they would grow straight and tall. He remembers how proud she was when they finally bloomed, turning their bright faces toward the kitchen window. A heavy lump rises in his throat. He opens his eyes, blinking against the bright, golden light. He is surrounded by millions of the flowers, a harvest greater than anything his mother could have ever imagined, but he has never felt so profoundly alone. He lowers his hand, tucking his thumbs behind the heavy leather straps of his gear, and simply keeps walking, carrying the weight of that beautiful garden in his chest. The march continues, an endless procession through the gold. The men do not speak much. The heat and the hypnotic swaying of the flowers pull the words from their mouths, leaving only the quiet rhythm of their breathing and the soft crunch of their boots. Ahead of the young man, an older soldier suddenly stumbles. His foot catches on a hidden rut in the baked earth, and his legs, heavy with 1,000 miles of fatigue, simply give way. He falls sideways, vanishing for a moment into the thick, green stalks of the flowers. There is no shouting. The young soldier steps forward, reaching down into the sea of yellow. He grasps the older man's canvas harness and, with a quiet, strained heave, pulls him back to his feet. The older man leans heavily against him for a moment, catching his breath. His face is pale beneath the sunburn and the dust. He looks at the boy, his eyes filled with a quiet, exhausted gratitude. The young soldier reaches out and gently brushes a bright yellow petal from the older man's shoulder. It is a tender, deeply human gesture, a small act of grooming that belongs to a peaceful world, not to this long and endless march. The older man nods, a silent thank you, and reaches for his metal canteen. He unscrews the cap and hands it to the boy first. The water is completely warm, tasting of metal and old canvas, but they share it like a fine wine, a communion of shared endurance in the middle of a golden sea. As the afternoon slowly bleeds into evening, a miraculous thing begins to happen. The sun, an angry white eye in the sky, begins to soften, turning a deep, liquid orange as it sinks toward the western horizon. And as it moves, the millions of sunflowers move with it. The men watch in quiet awe as the entire landscape seems to physically turn, a slow, synchronized bowing of heads as the flowers track the fading light. It is as if the earth itself is offering a silent, reverent prayer to the evening. The air begins to cool, the heavy heat lifting from their shoulders like a discarded woolen blanket. The order is finally given to halt. The engines of the panzers cough, sputter, and fall into a sudden, magnificent silence. The buzzing of the bees fades, replaced by the gentle, papery rustling of the large green leaves stirring in the twilight breeze. Tonight, there are no tents to pitch. There is no need to dig into the cold earth. The men simply wade a few feet into the fields, pushing down a small clearing among the stalks to make their beds. They lie down on the crushed green leaves, looking up through the canopy of yellow crowns to the darkening sky above. It is a strange, fragrant sanctuary. The heavy scent of the crushed stalks and the sweet pollen fills their lungs, a natural incense that lulls their exhausted bodies toward sleep. In one of these small, hidden clearings, a soldier sits cross-legged, the canvas map case resting on his knees serving as a makeshift desk. He has a small, stubby pencil and a battered notebook with soft, curled edges. The light is failing fast, turning the yellow flowers into dark, imposing silhouettes against the bruised, purple sky. Before he writes, he reaches up and carefully plucks a single, perfect petal from the flower nodding just above his head. His hands are rough, calloused, and stained with machine oil, but he handles the petal with agonizing delicacy, as if holding a piece of fragile glass. He opens his notebook to a blank page and rests the yellow petal gently against the paper. He smooths it flat with his thumb, and then he begins to write. He does not write about the distance they have covered. He does not write about the dust, or the exhaustion that makes his hands tremble slightly as he holds the pencil. He writes to his wife, a woman who lives in a city of gray stone and narrow streets, a world away from this vast and open sky. He writes, "My darling, today we walk through a dream. The world is nothing but gold and green, endless fields of flowers that bow their heads to the sun. It is so quiet tonight, and the air smells like sweet honey. I have pressed a piece of this world into this page for you. When you open this letter, long after the summer is gone, I want you to hold this pedal and know that even in this vast and lonely place, my heart is completely full of you. I walk through paradise, but I am only looking for the road that leads me back to your door. He closes the notebook, pressing the cover tight to seal the fragile yellow pedal inside. He holds the book against his chest, leaning his head back against the thick stalk of a sunflower. The sorrow of the steppe is a quiet thing. It is not the sharp panic of danger, but the dull, constant ache of separation, made infinitely heavier by the staggering beauty of the world around them. To see something so magnificent, and to have no one to share it with, is a profound and lonely burden. The sky finally turns to a deep, absolute black. The first stars emerge, bright and steady, glittering like scattered salt across the heavens. The sunflowers stand like silent, sleeping guardians over the exhausted men. The camp falls completely still. There is only the sound of thousands of men breathing in the dark, their chests rising and falling in rhythm with the gentle swaying of the field. They sleep surrounded by the bright ghosts of the summer day, wrapped in the sweet, earthy fragrance of the crushed leaves. In their dreams, they are not marching. They are walking hand in hand with the people they love, strolling through quiet, sunlit gardens, far away from the iron and the dust. They hold on to these visions, anchored by the tiny, pressed petals hidden in their pockets, seeking comfort in the beautiful, heartbreaking illusion of the flowers. And as the night deepens, the gentle summer wind whispers through the stalks, a soft, soothing lullaby that brushes against their sleeping faces, carrying the sorrow away into the dark, and leaving only the peaceful, golden silence of the steppe. The wind no longer smelled of crushed grass and summer dust. It tasted, faintly, of old fire and falling shadow. For thousands of miles, the men of the Fourth Panzer Army had chased an endless horizon, a retreating line where the vast steppe met the open sky. But as the long afternoon deepened into twilight, the great march finally met its boundary. The rolling earth simply stopped, falling away into the deep, carved basin of a mighty river. This was the Volga. It was not a gentle country stream, but a massive, dark artery cutting through the continent, wide and impenetrable. The water was black as obsidian, moving with a slow, heavy, and ancient grace. To stand on the bluffs and look out over that dark expanse was to stand at the very edge of the world. The men halted. The long, snaking columns of transport trucks, wagons, and towering panzers ground to a final, exhausted standstill. The engines were silenced, their low rumble replaced by the deep, resonant murmur of the moving water below. But it was not the river that held their gaze. It was the sky above it. Across the dark water, the horizon was glowing. It was not the gentle, bruised purple of a setting sun. It was a deep, unnatural, pulsing orange, a color that seemed to breathe and shift in the gathering dark. The distant city was burning. From this far away, there was no sound of the destruction, no roar of collapsing stone. There was only this silent, haunting illumination, a massive, glowing ember resting against the edge of the earth. And then, the ash began to fall. It drifted down from the pale evening sky like a dark, summer snow. It was weightless and delicate, a fine gray powder that danced softly on the wind. It landed gently on the shoulders of the men, on the dark wool of their caps, and on the rusted, weary iron of the sleeping machines. The long journey was over. The endless days of marching through the golden sunflowers, the shivering nights beneath the frost, the suffocating dust, it had all led them to this dark river, to this rain of quiet ash. A profound, heavy realization settled over the encampment. The innocence of the open road was gone. The vast, empty spaces of the steppe had been a kind of freedom, a shared, walking dream. But now, staring at the glowing horizon, they felt the walls of the world closing in. Down by the muddy banks of the river, a young soldier kneels near the water's edge. He is a boy from a small town with a quiet, winding creek, a place where the water runs clear over smooth, white stones. He stares into the dark, churning depths of the Volga. He reaches down, breaking the surface with his bare hands. The water is freezing, a sharp, icy shock against his skin. He cups his hands, bringing the water to his face to wash away the sweat and the grime of the long march. As the cold water slips through his fingers, he opens his eyes. The reflection of the burning city dances on the ripples, turning the black water into a mirror of liquid fire. He watches a single flake of gray ash land softly on the surface, resting there for a fragile moment before being swallowed by the current. He stays kneeling in the damp earth, his wet hands resting on his thighs. He feels incredibly small. He thinks of his bedroom back home, of the small window that looked out over the neighbor's apple orchard. He tries to summon the memory of how the light slanted through the glass on a Sunday morning, trying to anchor himself to a world that feels as though it is slipping away. The gentle lap of the dark water against the muddy bank sounds like a ticking clock, counting the quiet moments before they must cross into the shadow. A little further up the bank, away from the water, an older corporal sits on an overturned wooden ammunition crate. The light is failing quickly, leaving only the eerie, orange glow from across the river to see by. He has unbuttoned his tunic, letting the cool evening air touch his tired skin. On his lap rests a small, leather-bound notebook. He is writing a letter to his sister. He holds the stub of his pencil delicately, his hand moving with a slow, deliberate care. "We have reached the great river," he writes. "The water is so dark it looks like the night sky poured onto the earth. We have walked as far as our boots can carry us. The world ends here, my dear sister." Across the water, the sky is glowing, and a gray snow is falling on our coats. It is so quiet tonight. The men are sitting by the banks, just watching the water. We are all so tired. He pauses, taking a slow breath. A flake of ash drifts down from the sky and lands directly on the page, resting near the freshly written ink. He does not blow it away. He leaves it there, a physical piece of this haunting twilight, pressing it into the paper with the tip of his finger. "I miss the sound of your piano," he continues, his handwriting softening. "I miss the way the house smelled on baking day. Keep those things safe for me. Hold them tightly. The world out here is very large, and it is very dark. I am sending all my love to you, across the miles, across the plains, back to the light." He closes the notebook, folding his hands over it. He looks around at the men resting in the strange, pulsing twilight. They are gathered in small, quiet groups, sitting in the tall reeds or leaning against the thick trunks of the riverside trees. They look like shadows themselves, their outlines blurred by the falling ash and the failing light. There is no conversation. The sheer weight of the destination has stolen their words. They share a collective, unspoken mourning for the end of their long march, and for the youth they have left scattered across the thousands of miles of dust behind them. Two soldiers sit shoulder to shoulder against the broad, steel track of a silent panzer. The metal is still faintly warm from the day's work, offering a comforting, solid presence against their backs. One of the men pulls a small tin from his pocket. Inside is a delicate roll of tobacco and a single, crumpled paper. He rolls a cigarette with practiced, careful movements, treating the meager tobacco like spun gold. He places the cigarette between his lips and strikes a match. The small, yellow flare illuminates their tired, soot-stained faces for a brief, beautiful second. He inhales deeply, the tip of the cigarette glowing bright red in the dark. He exhales a long, slow plume of silver smoke, watching it mingle with the falling ash. Without a word, he passes the cigarette to his friend. The second man takes it, his fingers brushing against the first man's hand. It is a fleeting touch, but in this heavy, isolating twilight, it is an anchor. It is a quiet promise that they are not alone. As he inhales, the cherry of the cigarette flares again, a tiny, glowing ember that perfectly mirrors the massive, burning horizon across the dark river. They sit in comfortable silence, passing the smoke back and forth, watching the black water roll endlessly past. They do not think of the crossing to come. They do not think of the ruins waiting on the other side. They just exist in this suspended moment, a fragile pocket of peace caught between the long journey and the dark unknown. The air grows colder as the night deepens, but the glowing horizon never fades. It casts long, strange shadows across the encampment, painting the men and the machines in hues of bruised purple and rust. The ash continues to fall, dusting the world in a soft, gray melancholy. The men pull their heavy coats tighter around their shoulders, resting their heads on their rucksacks. The soft, rhythmic sound of the river flowing over the muddy banks is a gentle, hypnotic lullaby. It is the sound of time moving forward, unstoppable and indifferent. A young driver, lying in the bed of his transport truck, looks up at the sky. The stars are obscured by the thin veil of smoke and ash, hidden away just when the men need their distant, comforting light the most. He closes his eyes, letting the darkness take him. He focuses on the quiet, steady beating of his own heart. It is a small, stubborn rhythm, a private defiance against the immense silence of the world around him. He dreams not of the burning city, but of the river back home. He dreams of clear water and green leaves, of a time before the endless roads, before the dust, before the ash. The Fourth Panzer Army sleeps on the banks of the Volga. They are suspended in the twilight, resting at the edge of the world. The long march is a memory, and the dark water waits in the morning. But for tonight, there is only the gentle falling of the ash, the quiet breathing of brothers in the dark, and the soft, beautiful sorrow of a journey that has finally come to an end. The sky vanished, replaced by a jagged canopy of broken stone and the long, heavy shadows of a shattered world. The endless, rolling ocean of the steppe is gone. The vast horizon, which had stretched out before them for so many thousands of miles, has been violently erased, replaced by the claustrophobic geometry of a ruined city. The open air, once heavy with the scent of sunflowers and summer dust, is now choked with the dry, powdery smell of crushed mortar, ancient brick, and cold ash. The men of the Fourth Panzer Army have traded the infinite space of the world for the suffocating embrace of the rubble. They are no longer marching. The great, sweeping movements of the summer have been reduced to crawling through shattered doorways and hiding beneath the collapsed ceilings of forgotten basements. Their world is no longer measured in miles, but in inches. It is measured by the distance between a crumbling wall and a twisted steel beam, by the narrow, dark corridors carved through the debris. But tonight, the grinding noise of the daylight has stopped. A profound, heavy quiet has settled over the ruins, a silence so deep it rings in the ears. Down in the dark, beneath the mountains of broken stone, the men have found a sanctuary. It is a cellar, the forgotten foundation of what used to be a bakery or perhaps a quiet apartment block. The ceiling is low, crisscrossed with the exposed, splintered ribs of wooden floorboards. The air down here is damp and incredibly still, insulated from the biting wind that howls through the skeletal remains of the city above. To step into the cellar is to step out of the war and into a hidden, subterranean pocket of suspended time. There are perhaps 10 men in this small, earthen room. They sit with their backs pressed against the cool, damp bricks, their knees pulled tightly to their chests. In the very center of the floor, resting on a flat piece of slate, is a single, solitary candle. It is a fragile, trembling thing, a tiny teardrop of flame that casts a warm, golden circle of light in the overwhelming dark. The light dances across their faces, revealing masks of pale gray dust. The dust is everywhere. It is woven into the fibers of their heavy coats, it rests in the deep lines around their exhausted eyes, it coats their eyelashes like a fine, powdered snow. They look like statues carved from the very ruins that surround them. Yet, beneath the dust, they are so incredibly, softly human. In this tight, claustrophobic space, the vastness of the war ceases to matter. There are no maps down here. There are no grand objectives. There is only the immediate, desperate need for comfort, for the reassurance that they have not been swallowed entirely by the stone. Look at the soldier sitting nearest the flickering candle. His hands, rough and permanently stained with grease and soot, are holding a small, delicate object he found in the rubble above. It is a broken piece of a porcelain teacup. The edge is jagged, but the smooth, curved surface is painted with a beautiful, intricate pattern of tiny blue cornflowers. He traces the painted flowers with his thumb, his touch is light as a feather. He does not see the ruined cellar. As he looks at the blue flowers, he is transported to a bright, sunlit kitchen. He hears the soft clinking of spoons against saucers. He smells the rich, warm aroma of roasted coffee and sweet vanilla. He sees the hands of his grandmother, delicate and thin, pouring tea from a matching pot on a Sunday afternoon. The contrast is staggering, the brutal, crushing weight of the collapsed city above, and the soft, beautiful memory held in the palm of his hand. He holds the piece of porcelain like a sacred relic. It is a tether to a gentle world that feels like it existed 1,000 lifetimes ago. He gently slips the broken piece into his breast pocket, placing it close to his heart, keeping the memory safe from the dark. Across the cellar, a quiet rustling breaks the silence. A man is reaching into the deep pockets of his wool tunic. His movements are agonizingly slow, treating the unseen object with absolute reverence. He produces a small, crumpled foil packet. Inside, there is a pinch of dry tobacco and a single, fragile square of rolling paper. The men around him do not speak, but their eyes are drawn to his hands. In this place of absolute deprivation, a cigarette is a treasure beyond measure. It is warmth, it is flavor, it is a few fleeting minutes of peace. He rolls the tobacco carefully, catching every stray flake that falls, ensuring nothing is lost. He places the thin, crooked cigarette between his dry lips. Another man leans forward, striking a match against a piece of rough brick. The match flares, a sudden, bright star in the cellar. The light illuminates their two faces, leaning close together. You can see the profound weariness in their eyes, the hollows of their cheeks, but you can also see a deep, unbreakable brotherhood. The first man inhales, the tip of the cigarette glowing a bright, cherry red. He closes his eyes, letting the smoke fill his lungs, letting the brief, narcotic calm wash over his frayed nerves. He exhales, a long, slow sigh of silver smoke that drifts upward toward the splintered ceiling. He does not smoke it down. He takes only 2 careful drags, and then, without a single word spoken, he passes it to the man who lit the match. The second man takes it with a gentle nod. He smokes, and then passes it to the next man in the circle. It is a silent communion in the dark. As the glowing ember moves from hand to hand, it weaves an invisible thread between them. The sharing of this tiny comfort is an act of pure, quiet heroism. It is a refusal to let the selfishness of survival turn their hearts to stone. They are sharing a single breath, a single moment of warmth, holding each other up in the shadows. The scent of the burning tobacco fills the damp cellar, a sharp, familiar, and deeply comforting smell that temporarily masks the scent of the ruins. From the far corner of the room, hidden entirely in the shadows beyond the candle's reach, comes a sound. It is a voice, pitched so low it is barely more than a breath. It is the rhythmic, hypnotic murmur of a whispered prayer. The words are indistinct, blurring together into a soft, flowing cadence. It does not matter what the words are, or to whom they are spoken. It is the rhythm that matters. The steady, unbroken hum of the prayer acts as a gentle lullaby in the dark. It is the sound of a human soul clinging to hope, a quiet defiance against the crushing weight of the stone. The other men do not interrupt him. They close their eyes and let the soft, melodic whispering wash over them. It soothes their racing hearts. It wraps around them like a warm blanket, a reminder that even in this shattered place, there is still faith, there is still love, there is still a quiet grace to be found in the darkest corners of the earth. Above them, the wind moves through the broken bones of the city. It whistles through empty window frames and sighs over the jagged edges of collapsed walls. It sounds like a great, mournful cello, playing a slow, sorrowful song for the sleeping world. But down in the cellar, the wind is only a distant echo, a soft vibration in the bricks behind their backs. A soldier sitting near the cellar's narrow, grated window pulls a small notebook from his pack. A single, pale shaft of moonlight falls through the grate, cutting through the darkness and illuminating the blank page. He takes a piece of charred wood, scavenged from a burnt beam, and uses it as a pencil. He writes to his wife. "My darling," he writes, the charcoal leaving thick, dark marks on the paper. "We are sleeping in the deep earth tonight. Above us, the world is broken, but down here, we are safe. It is so quiet. The dust falls from the ceiling like a very fine snow. I watch the moonlight touch the floor, and I thought of the way the moon shines on the pond behind our house. I thought of the way your hair looks when you stand by the window at night." He pauses, listening to the soft breathing of the men around him and the gentle murmur of the prayer from the corner. "We are so tired, my love. The stone is heavy, but my heart is light because I carry you in it. When I close my eyes, I am not in this cellar. I am walking up the pathway to our door. I am coming home. Wait for me in the quiet moments. Wait for me in the light." He folds the letter carefully, brushing a smudge of charcoal from the edge, and tucks it into his pocket. He leans his head back against the wall. The candle in the center of the room finally begins to fail. The pool of melted wax runs dry, and the tiny flame sputters, dancing wildly for a moment before shrinking down into a glowing red, and then vanishing entirely. The cellar is plunged into absolute, velvety darkness. The single beam of moonlight from the grate is the only illumination left, a pale, ghostly finger pointing at the earthen floor. No one moves to light another match. The darkness is welcome. It is a heavy, protective cloak that hides the dust, hides the ruins, and hides their exhaustion. In the pitch black, the claustrophobia of the cellar melts away, and the space becomes infinite. They shift their weight, sliding down the brick walls until they are lying on the floor. They huddle together instinctively, seeking the physical warmth of the men beside them. Shoulders press against shoulders, backs are braced against chests. They become a single, breathing entity, a knot of shared humanity in the belly of the ruined city. The stone around them is cold, hard, and unforgiving, but the men themselves are soft, fragile, and full of quiet resilience. They have survived another day not through force or fury, but through the small, delicate gestures of kindness, a shared cigarette, a whispered prayer, a remembered flower, a letter written in charcoal. The echoes in the rubble fade away. The wind above settles into a low, gentle hum. And as the night stretches out, holding the broken city in its dark embrace, the soldiers in the cellar finally let go. They drift away on the soft cadence of the sleeping breaths around them, leaving the stone and the shadows behind, escaping into the warm, peaceful sanctuary of their dreams. The snow did not fall, it flew, a blinding, sideways river of white that swallowed the earth and the sky. There is a terrible, breathtaking beauty in a true winter storm on the open steppe. It erases the world. It takes away the horizon, the roads, the trees, and the very ground beneath your feet, leaving only an endless, swirling void of pale gray and brilliant white. In this profound emptiness, all sense of distance and time simply melts away. You are left floating in a frozen dream, a place where the wind sings a long, low morning song, a lullaby of ice and isolation. Outside the ring of the shattered city, the men of the rescue force sit in the cabs of their idling transports and within the dark, cramped bellies of their panzers. They are the brothers on the outside. They know that somewhere in that blinding white void, miles ahead, their friends are waiting in the dark cellars of the ruins. They know they are hungry. They know they are freezing. And they know they are listening for the sound of engines in the dark. This is not a story of military strategy. This is a story of profound, desperate love. The order is given not with a shout, but with a quiet, heavy nod. The engines rev, coughing thick plumes of dark gray exhaust into the swirling snow. The great iron machines lurch forward, pushing their heavy steel tracks into snowdrifts that are already as high as a man's chest. They are sailing into an ocean of frost, ghost ships made of rusted metal and exhausted flesh, entirely determined to reach the shores of the ruined city. Listen to the sound of their progress. It is muffled, swallowed almost instantly by the heavy curtain of the blizzard. The grinding of the gears, the squeal of the tracks, the revving of the massive engines, all of it is reduced to a soft, distant hum. The storm acts as a heavy blanket, pressing down on the noise, wrapping the entire convoy in a surreal, dreamlike quiet. Inside the lead panzer, the air is freezing, smelling of diesel, cold steel, and damp wool. The driver, a boy who looks far too young to be steering such a massive beast, leans his face close to the narrow vision slit. The glass is thick with frost, leaving only a tiny sliver of visibility. Through that small window, all he sees is a hypnotic, rushing wall of white. He blinks, his eyelashes heavy with tiny crystals of ice. He is so incredibly tired. His muscles ache from the constant vibration, and the cold has seeped through his heavy boots, turning his feet to blocks of numb wood. But he does not stop. He presses his foot down on the pedal, asking the freezing engine for just a little more power. He is not driving toward a coordinate on a map. He is driving toward a face. His older brother is trapped in the city. When he closes his tired eyes for just a fraction of a second, he sees him. He sees his brother's easy smile, the way he used to laugh when they worked together in their father's carpentry shop, the smell of fresh sawdust and warm sunlight. He remembers the last time they spoke, sharing a quiet cigarette on the edge of the summer steppe, promising to watch out for each other. That promise is a physical thing inside the young driver's chest. It is a glowing, fragile ember of hope, burning bright and warm against the crushing cold of the blizzard. He imagines breaking through the snow, stopping the panzer, and opening the hatch. He imagines reaching down into the rubble and pulling his brother up into the light. This beautiful, desperate vision is the only thing keeping his heavy eyes open. He steers the machine into the wind, carrying the weight of his love through the storm. Outside, clinging to the flat back of the armored vehicles, the infantrymen huddle together. They are completely exposed to the wrath of the blizzard. They look like pale, snow-covered statues, their forms blurred by the thick layer of white that clings to their coats, their helmets, and their shoulders. They sit with their backs pressed tightly against the cold metal of the turret, wrapping their arms around one another. In this howling wilderness, human body heat is the most precious currency in the world. They press their helmets together, creating a tiny, fragile windbreak. One of the men, an older corporal with deep, gentle lines etched around his eyes, has his hand thrust deep into the breast pocket of his greatcoat. He is not reaching for a weapon. He is holding a small, soft parcel wrapped in brown paper. Inside the parcel is a pair of thick, hand-knitted woolen socks. They arrived in the last mail delivery before the winter closed its fist around the army. They were sent by the mother of a young soldier in his squad, a boy who was transferred into the city just before the encirclement. The corporal had promised the mother, in a letter written by the light of a dying campfire, that he would look after her son. He keeps his hand wrapped around the parcel, pressing it against his heart to keep the wool warm. It is a heartbreakingly tender gesture. He is trying to preserve a tiny pocket of a mother's love, carrying it through the most hostile environment on earth, hoping against hope that he can place it into the freezing hands of her boy. He leans his head against the shoulder of the man next to him. He cannot feel his legs anymore. The wind is a physical weight, pushing against his chest, trying to force the breath from his lungs. But he holds onto the parcel. He holds onto the promise. It is the quiet, everyday heroism of a man who refuses to let the cruelty of the storm extinguish his humanity. But the steppe is vast, and the winter is ancient. It does not care for promises. It does not care for brothers, or mothers, or the fragile, beautiful hopes of young men. The snow deepens. It piles up in massive, shifting drifts that look like the frozen waves of a turbulent sea. The wind howls louder, shaking the heavy vehicles, blinding the drivers entirely. The engines begin to strain, a high, agonizing whine that speaks of failing power. The steel tracks spin helplessly in the deep, powdery snow, no longer biting into the earth, but simply churning the endless white. One by one, the great machines begin to slow. The young driver in the lead panzer pushes the pedal as hard as he can. The engine roars, a defiant, desperate sound, but the machine does not move forward. It slides sideways, sinking deeper into a massive drift, and then, with a heavy, metallic shudder, the engine simply gives out. The silence that follows is devastating. It is not a sudden, violent crash. It is a slow, agonizing fading away. The life drains out of the machines, and the immense, crushing quiet of the blizzard rushes in to take its place. Down the line, the other vehicles meet the same fate. They are bogged down, buried, defeated by the sheer, magnificent power of the snow. The men sitting on the back of the tanks do not move immediately. They just sit there, covered in snow, listening to the wind. The realization settles over them slowly, a heavy, cold weight descending upon their hearts. They cannot go any further. They are so close. If the wind would only stop, if the snow would only clear for just a moment, they might be able to see the ruined skyline of the city. They might be able to see the very place where their brothers are waiting. But the storm is an impenetrable wall. The distance between them, though small in miles, has become an eternity of ice. Inside the quiet, freezing cab of his panzer, the young driver takes his trembling hands off the steering levers. He rests his forehead against the cold, frosted glass of the vision slit. He closes his eyes, and a single, warm tear slips down his cheek, tracing a clean path through the dirt and the dust, before freezing completely on his chin. He whispers his brother's name into the empty air. It is a soft, fragile sound, entirely swallowed by the wind outside. The glowing ember of hope in his chest flickers, trembles, and slowly, quietly, goes out. On the back of the tank, the older corporal bows his head. He pulls his hand out of his coat, still holding the small brown parcel. He looks at it, brushing a flake of snow from the paper. He thinks of the boy in the city, shivering in a dark cellar, waiting for the sound of rescue that will not come. He thinks of the mother, sitting by a warm hearth hundreds of miles away, believing her son is safe. The sorrow he feels is so deep, so profound, that it leaves him entirely breathless. He carefully tucks the parcel back into his coat, placing it gently over his heart. He will carry it for the boy. He will carry the memory of him, keeping it warm in the dark. The flicker in the blizzard has been extinguished. The light of rescue has faded into the vast, indifferent white. There is no shouting. There is no anger. There is only a deep, poetic melancholy, a quiet surrender to the overwhelming forces of the natural world. The men know that they have given everything they have. They have poured their love, their strength, and their very souls into the snow, and the snow has simply absorbed it all. They climb down into the deep drifts, moving like slow, heavy ghosts. They gather together in the lee of the silent machines, seeking shelter from the biting wind. They pull canvas tarps over their heads, creating tiny, dark caves of shared warmth. They huddle close, pressing their shoulders together, pooling the last remnants of their body heat. They do not speak. There are no words left that can comfort this kind of sorrow. But in the silence, there is a profound connection. They lean against each other, offering the simple, quiet comfort of their presence. They look toward the east, toward the city hidden in the storm. They send their thoughts out into the wind. They imagine the wind carrying their love across the frozen miles, slipping down into the dark cellars, and wrapping around the shoulders of their stranded brothers like a warm, invisible blanket. They send silent prayers into the snow, whispering good night to the men they could not reach. The blizzard continues its long, mournful lullaby. It wraps the stranded vehicles in soft, white shrouds, turning them back into sleeping hills on the steppe. It covers the men, burying their sorrow under a pure, seamless blanket of ice. As the heavy, freezing twilight deepens into night, the men close their eyes. The exhaustion pulls them down into a deep, heavy slumber. They drift away on the sound of the wind, escaping the cold and the heartbreak, traveling back to a place of warmth and memory. They sleep together in the dark, held safe by the unbreakable bond of their shared struggle, finding a gentle, quiet peace in the heart of the eternal snow. To turn your back on the horizon you have chased for so long is to feel the very earth tilt beneath your tired feet. The order did not come with a shout, nor with the sharp, startling blast of a whistle. It came as a quiet murmur, passed gently from man to man, a heavy sigh moving like a ghost through the freezing air. They were to turn around. The shattered city in the snow, the ruins where so many of their brothers still waited in the dark, was to be left behind. Picture them standing there on the great white plain in the fading afternoon light. For months, they had only known one direction. They had marched east into the blinding summer dust, east into the heavy autumn mud, east into the howling blizzards. Every step had been a testament to their endurance, pulling them further and further from the warm hearths of their childhoods. But now, they must pivot slowly in the deep, unyielding snow. They turned their heavy shoulders away from the rising sun, and they faced the west. The long walk home has begun, but it is not a triumphant return. It is a slow, mournful procession beneath a sky that seems far too large, a sky that threatens to swallow them whole. Every step they take feels as though they are pulling their boots from deep, freezing water. The snow is relentless, a powdery, shifting ocean that offers no solid footing. It drags at their ankles, demanding a profound physical toll for every inch of ground reclaimed. And the wind comes off the vast steppe with a cruel, ancient bite. It no longer whispers of summer sunflowers or green leaves. It howls a hollow, lonely song. It freezes the moisture on their eyelashes and turns their breath into delicate silver crystals that shatter instantly in the air. But the heaviest burden they carry today is not the bitter cold, nor the weight of their rifles and packs. It is the crushing silence of failure. It is a physical weight, settling deep into their chests, making it hard to draw a full breath. They are leaving pieces of their own hearts behind in the rubble of that lost city. They are walking away from the men they shared their last rations with, the men who laughed with them around the dying campfires of autumn, the men who shared whispered stories in the dark cellars just days ago. To walk west is to admit that those boys are now only memories, gentle ghosts permanently anchored to the frozen earth. The grief is an invisible shroud wrapped tightly around the entire column. Look at the man walking near the rear of the line. He is tall, though his posture is bent, curved like a wooden bow against the relentless wind. His face is wrapped in a tattered, frost-covered woolen scarf, leaving only his dark, exhausted eyes exposed to the fading light. Inside his heavy coat, pressed tightly against his ribs for warmth, is a small, carved wooden pipe. It belonged to his grandfather. It still smells faintly of sweet cherry tobacco, a soft, lingering scent that reminds him of a small, wood-paneled room and the steady, comforting ticking of a tall grandfather clock. He reaches his hand inside his coat, wrapping his frozen, numb fingers around the smooth wood. He does not have tobacco to smoke, but he does not need it. The smooth curve of the pipe is a touchstone. It is a physical piece of a world that makes sense, a world that is warm and safe and waiting for his return. As he walks, the rhythmic crunch of his boots in the snow becomes the ticking of that clock. He closes his eyes for just a fleeting second, letting the hypnotic rhythm carry him away from the desolate steppe, transporting his mind back to a worn armchair by a crackling fire. He holds onto that mental warmth desperately, shielding it from the howling wind outside. The march is agonizingly slow. The men move like sleepwalkers, their heads bowed low, their eyes tracing the faint, snowy tracks of the man directly in front of them. When the soldier with the wooden pipe suddenly stumbles, his boot catching on a hidden root beneath the drifts, he falls heavily to his knees. He stays there for a moment. The snow is surprisingly soft against his face. The urge to simply lie down, to close his heavy eyes and let the white blanket cover him, begins to sing a sweet, deceptive lullaby in his mind. It would be so easy to just stop walking. But before that dark thought can take root, two hands reach down from the gray twilight. They belong to a young corporal, a boy whose own face is pale and drawn with sheer exhaustion. The corporal does not say a word. He simply grips the fallen man's canvas harness and heaves upward with whatever quiet strength he has left. They stand there for a moment, swaying slightly in the wind, leaning against each other. They are two fragile pillars holding each other up in the wasteland. The corporal gives the older man's shoulder a firm, reassuring squeeze. It is a silent, unbreakable promise. We will not let each other fall. We carry this weight together. The older man nods, a slow dip of his frost-covered helmet, and together they step forward into the snow. As the day bleeds slowly away, the sky transitions from a pale, blinding white to a deep, bruised violet. The vastness of the steppe is terrifying in the twilight. There are no gentle hills to break the wind, no dark forests to offer shelter. There is only the flat, endless expanse of snow meeting the darkening sky at the edge of the world. And then, the stars begin to appear. They are brilliant, icy diamonds scattered across the velvet dark. They are staggeringly beautiful, a breathtaking canopy of light stretching over the retreating army. But tonight, they feel profoundly indifferent. They shine with the same cold, perfect clarity over these exhausted men as they do over the warm roofs of their homes thousands of miles away. The majestic indifference of the universe stands in stark contrast to the burning, agonizing humanity of the men struggling on the ground below. Finally, the column comes to a halt. The day's march is over. There are no tents to pitch tonight, no warm fires to build. The wind is too fierce, the wood too deeply buried beneath the drifts. They must survive the night entirely exposed on the open ice. Using their small entrenching tools and their bare, freezing hands, they scrape shallow depressions in the snow, building small, fragile walls of white to block the worst of the biting gale. It is a desperate, quiet labor, performed with the last reserves of their fading energy. They lie down together in these icy hollows, pressing their bodies as close as humanly possible. They interlock their arms and legs, sharing the meager, precious warmth of their shivering frames. They pull stiff, frozen canvas tarps over their heads, creating tiny, dark caves in the snow. Beneath the canvas, the air smells of wet wool, stale sweat, and the deep, metallic scent of the freezing night. It is here, in the pitch black, huddled together like frightened children hiding from a storm, that the tears finally fall. They do not cry out loud. There is no sobbing, no dramatic wailing to compete with the wind. It is a quiet, secret release. The tears slip silently from the corners of their closed eyes, warm tracks of sorrow tracing through the grime and the frost on their cheeks. They cry for the miles they walked in vain. They cry for the beautiful, heartbreaking letters in their pockets that they may never get to answer. They cry for the friends they left behind in the ruins, the boys who will never see the spring again. And they cry for the profound, overwhelming loneliness of the open steppe. The man with the grandfather's pipe feels a sudden, warm drop of moisture fall onto the back of his hand. It is a tear from the face of the young corporal pressed tightly against his chest in the dark. The older man does not wipe it away. He does not speak to offer empty comfort. He simply tightens his arm around the boy, holding him closer, offering the steady, rhythmic beating of his own heart as a shield against the dark. These tears on the steppe are a quiet baptism of sorrow. They wash away the remnants of the soldiers they were supposed to be, the conquerors made of iron and steel. What is left behind are simply fragile, beautiful human beings, profoundly homesick and clinging to one another for survival. The wind howls above them, playing a long, mournful symphony on the strings of the winter night. But beneath the snow, beneath the heavy canvas tarps, there is a quiet resilience that the frost cannot touch. It is the steady, synchronized breathing of brothers. It is the stubborn refusal to fade away into the white void. They sleep, carried away on the icy wind to a place of gentle dreams. They dream of warm hearths, of hands holding theirs in the firelight, of the soft, green leaves of a forgotten spring. The vast, indifferent sky watches over them, a silent witness to their exhaustion. And as the deep night stretches on, holding the men in its freezing embrace, their quiet tears turn into delicate pearls of ice, small, glittering monuments to the love and the loss they carry with them on the long, heavy walk into the dark. The earth forgot the ice, exhaling a deep, green breath that covered the scars of the world in soft, living velvet. After the agonizing retreat, after the endless white void and the bitter, howling winds of winter, the great steppe has finally surrendered to the spring. And what a beautiful, staggering surrender it is. The landscape, once a barren ocean of frost and mud, has transformed into a vast, rolling tide of tall, emerald grass. It sways gently in the warm breeze, rippling like water beneath a sky so impossibly blue it aches the eyes to look at it for too long. A profound, heavy quiet has fallen over the Fourth Panzer Army. The engines are asleep. The grinding of the tracks and the endless, marching rhythm of heavy boots have been swallowed by the gentle, hypnotic hum of a million invisible insects. The air here is no longer sharp and biting. It is thick, warm, and wonderfully humid. It hangs over the resting encampments like a heavy, comforting blanket, smelling of damp soil, crushed wild mint, and the sweet, powdery fragrance of blooming wildflowers. It is the calm before the fire. Every man in the fields knows that this peace is fragile. They know that somewhere, beyond the gentle curve of the green horizon, the storm is gathering again. They can feel it in the heavy, pregnant air. But today, in this beautiful, suspended moment, the war feels like a distant rumor. The world has offered them a fleeting sanctuary in the tall grass, and they sink into it with a profound, exhausted gratitude. Look at the great iron machines, resting in the meadows. The towering panzers are half hidden by the height of the spring growth. Thick green stalks and delicate white flowers brush against their rusted road wheels. The heavy armor, baking gently in the late morning sun, is warm to the touch. They do not look like weapons of destruction today, they look like massive, slumbering beasts of the earth, perfectly at peace in the wild, overgrown pastures. The hatches are thrown wide open, allowing the fragrant spring breeze to sweep away the stale, metallic odors of the long winter. Scattered around these sleeping giants are the men. They are lying on their backs in the deep grass, entirely hidden from the world, swallowed by the green. If you walk softly through the meadow, you might not see them until you are right upon them. They have unbuttoned their heavy woolen tunics, casting off the belts and harnesses that have weighed them down for so many thousands of miles. They lie with their arms thrown wide, letting the warm, humid air touch their pale skin. A young soldier rests his head against his folded canvas pack. He is staring straight up into the endless blue. High above, large, white clouds drift lazily across the sky, heavy and slow. He watches them with the wide, innocent eyes of a child, tracing their shapes as they pull apart and reform. For the first time in an eternity, his mind is perfectly blank. He is not thinking about the miles behind him, or the miles ahead. He is simply listening to the soft, papery rustling of the grass blades rubbing together in the wind. A tiny, bright red ladybug lands softly on his knuckle. He does not brush it away. He holds his hand perfectly still, his breath catching in his throat, watching this tiny, perfect piece of life explore the rough, calloused landscape of his skin. It is such a small thing, so incredibly delicate, yet it fills him with a sudden, overwhelming tenderness. In a world that has asked him to be hard, to be made of iron and endurance, this tiny beetle is a gentle reminder of the fragile beauty of the living world. He lowers his hand carefully to the soil, letting the ladybug crawl away onto a blade of grass, protecting it with a quiet, unspoken grace. A few yards away, sitting cross-legged in the shade of a wide canopied tree, an older corporal is engaged in a quiet, domestic act. He holds a needle and a spool of coarse gray thread. He is carefully, meticulously mending a long tear in the sleeve of his uniform. His movements are slow and deliberate. He wets the end of the thread with his lips, squinting in the dappled sunlight as he guides it through the tiny eye of the needle. He pulls the frayed edges of the wool together, his rough hands moving with surprising delicacy. There is a deep, quiet heroism in this simple chore. It is a refusal to let the chaos of the world completely unravel him. By mending this tear, by restoring order to this small piece of cloth, he is quietly stitching his own dignity back together. The man sitting beside him watches in silence, leaning against the rough bark of the tree. He reaches for a metal canteen, takes a small sip of the lukewarm water, and holds it out to the corporal. The corporal pauses his sewing, takes the canteen with a gentle nod of thanks, and drinks. They do not need to speak. The humid air, the dappled shade, the shared water, it weaves a bond between them that is stronger than any spoken word. But as the afternoon stretches on, the true weight of this beautiful calm begins to settle over the camp. This is the hour of the letters. All across the green fields, men are reaching into their packs, pulling out battered notebooks, loose sheets of paper, and short, worn pencils. They use their knees, or the flat tops of ammunition crates, or the warm fenders of the trucks as writing desks. They are writing home. But these are not the letters of the previous summer, filled with the naive wonder of the open road. And they are not the frantic, shivering notes of the winter retreat. These letters carry a heavy, unspoken gravity. The men look out at the beautiful, blooming steppe, and they feel the deep, trembling intuition that this gentle spring might be their final season. They write these words as if they are laying down their very souls upon the paper. A young father sits with his back against the warm steel track of a Panzer. He stares at the blank page for a very long time. How do you say goodbye when you are not allowed to admit that you are leaving? How do you package all the love of a lifetime into a few fragile, folded squares of paper? He does not write about the gathering armies. He does not write about the fear that sits like a cold stone in the bottom of his stomach. Instead, he writes about the light. My darling, he begins, his handwriting slow and careful. The world is so green today. The grass is taller than my waist, and the air smells just like the meadows behind your father's house after a heavy rain. I am sitting in the sun, and I am warm. I want you to know that I am warm, and that I am resting. He pauses, pressing the heel of his hand against his tired eyes. He thinks of his little girl. He thinks of the way she used to hold onto his thumb when they walked down the street. Tell our little bird that I saw a flock of swallows today, dancing over the tall grass. Tell her they look just like the ones that nest in our eaves. If I am delayed this summer, if the letters stop coming for a while, I want you both to go into the garden. Stand in the sun, close your eyes, and feel the warmth on your faces. That is where I will be. I will be in the light, holding you both. Do not be afraid for me. I am carrying your love with me, and it makes me completely invincible. He finishes the letter, his hand trembling just slightly on the final word. He folds the paper with agonizing care, sealing it into an envelope, pressing his thumb firmly along the edge to ensure it holds. He places it carefully into the canvas sack that will be taken to the rear, sending a piece of his heart back across the endless miles. He is not the only one. All around him, men are pouring their quietest, most private truths into their letters. They are forgiving old arguments. They are making gentle promises. They are wrapping their families in a protective embrace of words, trying to shield the people they love from the storm that is about to break. It is an act of supreme, selfless love, performed in the quiet humidity of the tall grass. As the late afternoon transitions into evening, the golden hour arrives. The sun sinks lower, casting long, deeply beautiful shadows across the steppe. The light turns the tall green grass into a shimmering, rippling ocean of liquid gold. The heavy, humid air begins to cool, bringing a soft, sweet relief to the resting army. Small, smokeless fires are lit, just large enough to boil a tin cup of water for tea or to warm a meager ration of stew. The men gather around these tiny flames in small circles. The atmosphere is hushed, reverent. The anxiety of the coming days is put away, boxed up and hidden in the dark corners of their minds. Tonight is for peace. They pass the warm tin cups from hand to hand. They speak in low, soothing murmurs, their voices blending perfectly with the gentle rustling of the leaves and the distant, lonely call of a steppe bird. They talk of the simple things. They share the recipes their mothers used to cook. They describe the exact color of the wallpaper in their childhood bedrooms. They build temporary homes out of memory and shared whispers, finding shelter in the quiet companionship of the men sitting beside them. The sky slowly bruises into a deep, velvety purple, and the first stars emerge, soft and hesitant in the fading light. The great iron machines fade into dark silhouettes, standing like quiet sentinels over the resting men. The calm holds. It is a beautiful, melancholic pause in the turning of the world. The men lie back on their ground sheets, pulling their thin blankets up over their shoulders. The earth beneath them is soft and forgiving, holding them in a gentle, motherly embrace. They close their eyes, breathing in the sweet scent of the spring grass, feeling the residual warmth of the sun radiating up from the soil. They have written their goodbyes. They have mended their clothes. They have shared their water and their memories. They have done all they can to prepare their souls for whatever tomorrow brings. And so, as the heavy, peaceful night descends over the Fourth Panzer Army, they simply let go. They let the quiet of the meadow wash over them, a soothing, whispered lullaby that carries them away into the dark. They sleep in the beautiful, fragile green, dreaming of the light, waiting in perfect stillness for the coming of the fire. Even the earth trembled, as if frightened by the terrible, heavy weight of the iron storm that rolled across the summer plains. The gentle, whispering green steppe of only a few days ago has been entirely swallowed by a deep, unnatural twilight. The sky is no longer the vast, unbroken blue that held the drifting swallows. It is now a heavy ceiling woven with thick, dark ribbons of smoke and ash. The air itself vibrates. It is not a sound you hear only with your ears. It is a continuous, rolling thunder that travels up through the soles of your boots, moving through your legs, and settling deep within the marrow of your bones. It is the greatest clash of machines the world has ever known, a deafening tempest of steel and fire. But if you look closely, past the towering silhouettes of the panzers and the dark clouds of churning earth, you will not see a grand, sweeping tapestry of history. You will see something much smaller, and infinitely more beautiful. You will see a young man, pressing his hands over his ears, seeking a quiet place in the dark. In the face of such immense, overwhelming noise, a man realizes just how incredibly fragile he is. He is only soft flesh, delicate bone, and a quietly beating heart, caught in the middle of a wrestling match between iron giants. The scale of the world has grown too large, too loud, and too heavy to comprehend. And so, the men do what they have always done when the storm rages outside. They shrink the world down. They build tiny, invisible fortresses to protect their minds. Down in the bottom of a shallow, freshly turned crater, a young infantryman lies curled on his side. He has pulled his knees tightly to his chest, making himself as small as humanly possible. The earth walls around him crumble slightly with every distant tremor, dusting his shoulders with a fine, dry soil. He closes his eyes tight, shutting out the flashes of light and the rolling gray smoke. He is trying to build a sanctuary behind his eyelids. He focuses all of his dwindling energy on a single, peaceful memory. He pictures a rainy afternoon in his childhood home. He concentrates on the exact, rhythmic sound of the raindrops drumming against the tin roof of the porch. He remembers the cool, damp breeze blowing through the screen door, carrying the scent of wet pine needles and soaked earth. He breathes in, slowly and deeply, trying to pull that cool, fragrant air into his burning lungs. He hums a soft, toneless melody, a vibration in his own throat to rival the vibration of the earth, rocking himself gently in the cradle of the soil. Suddenly, a shadow falls over him. Another soldier, his face smeared completely with gray dust and black soot, slides down the steep embankment of the crater. The newcomer's chest heaves as he catches his breath. He looks at the boy curled on the ground. The noise above them is far too loud for any words to be spoken. To shout would be to surrender to the chaos. Instead, the older soldier reaches out with a trembling, calloused hand. He rests it firmly on the young boy's shoulder. He does not shake him. He simply applies a steady, grounding pressure. "I am here," the touch says. "You are not alone in the dark. We will wait out the thunder together." The young boy opens his eyes. He looks at the hand on his shoulder and then up at the exhausted face of his brother. A slow, deeply tired smile touches the corners of his dry lips. The older soldier unclips a dented metal canteen from his belt. He unscrews the cap and offers it forward. The boy takes a slow sip. The water is entirely warm, tasting heavily of tin and grit, but in this deafening wilderness, it is the sweetest nectar on earth. It is a shared sacrament of survival, a quiet, profound act of grace amidst the fury of the machines. Further down the line, away from the crater, the experience is different, but the smallness of man remains. Inside the belly of a resting panzer, the heat is suffocating. It is a tight, claustrophobic oven of thick steel, smelling heavily of hot engine oil, stale sweat, and the sharp, metallic tang of cordite. The crew of 4 men sits in the dim, amber glow of the instrument panels. They are encased in armor, protected from the flying earth outside, but they are prisoners of the heat and the noise. The driver, a man whose hands are permanently stained with dark grease, rests his forehead against the cool glass of his vision block. Outside, the world is nothing but a swirling gray fog. He cannot see the horizon. He cannot see the sky. He reaches into the breast pocket of his heavy tunic and pulls out a folded letter. The paper is wrapped in a piece of oilcloth to protect it from the sweat and the grime of the machine. He does not unfold it. The light is too poor, and his eyes are too heavy to read the words he already knows by heart. But he holds the square of paper between his palms, pressing his hands together as if in prayer. The letter is from his wife, written weeks ago in a quiet room overlooking a cobblestone street. He rubs his thumb over the folded edge, trying to feel the phantom pressure of her hand where she pressed the crease. In the overwhelming, deafening roar of the afternoon, that tiny piece of paper is his entire universe. It is his anchor. As the engine rumbles beneath his seat, vibrating through his spine, he closes his eyes and imagines he is sitting on a wooden bench in a quiet park, listening to the gentle rustling of leaves in the autumn wind. He holds the letter to his face, breathing in, searching for the faintest lingering scent of her lavender soap beneath the smell of the smoke. Slowly, agonizingly, the long summer afternoon begins to lose its breath. The storm of steel cannot last forever. The heavy, rolling thunder begins to fracture, breaking apart into smaller, more distant echoes. The gaps between the tremors grow longer, stretching into minutes. And then, a profound, ringing silence begins to seep back into the world. It does not happen all at once. It is like a great tide slowly receding from a rocky shore, leaving behind a vast, echoing quiet that feels almost too heavy to bear. The engines power down. The metal tracks cease their grinding. The men slowly uncork their ears, listening to the sudden, breathtaking absence of noise. The relief is absolute. It washes over them like cool water, loosening the tight, panicked knots in their chests and softening the rigid tension in their shoulders. It is evening. The thick, heavy smoke that has choked the sky all day still hangs over the steppe, but the descending sun has caught it. The smoke acts as a massive, natural filter, stripping away the harsh, blinding white glare of the sun, and leaving only a heavy, swollen sphere of deep, muted crimson. The sun looks tired. It is a dark, bloody red orb sinking slowly through the haze, hovering just above the broken horizon. It casts a strange, beautiful, and deeply melancholy light over the resting army. The red glow bathes the world, painting the rusted armor of the silent machines in shades of copper and rust. It softens the jagged edges of the churned earth, making the craters look like gentle, rolling dunes. And it casts impossibly long, stretching shadows across the fields. The men begin to climb out of their holes in the earth. They emerge from the steel hatches of the panzers. They move with an agonizing slowness, their limbs heavy with a pure, unadulterated exhaustion. They look like pale ghosts returning to the world of the living, bathed in the surreal, red twilight. Their faces are masks of gray dust, but their eyes are incredibly bright, shining with the simple, miraculous realization that they have survived another day. They gather in small, silent groups in the long shadows of the tanks. There is no cheering. There is no loud talking. The sheer magnitude of the day has stolen all their words, leaving only a deep, reverent need for rest. A medic moves quietly down the line. He has a canvas bag slung over his shoulder, but he is not carrying bandages right now. He is carrying a large metal tin of fresh water, drawn from a deep well far behind the lines. He carries a stack of small, white paper cups. He approaches a group of men leaning against the road wheels of a transport truck. He does not speak, he simply pours a small measure of the clear, cool water into a cup and hands it to the nearest man. The soldier takes it with trembling hands. He looks at the water, watching the red light of the sunset reflect perfectly on its surface. He drinks it slowly, letting the cool liquid wash away the dry, ashen taste of the afternoon. He closes his eyes and lets out a long, trembling sigh. The medic pours another cup, passing it to the next man. It is a quiet communion of peace, a gentle restoration of their humanity in the fading light. As the red sun finally dips below the edge of the world, the sky bruises into a deep, comforting purple. The thick smoke begins to thin, blowing away on the gentle, cooling evening breeze. High above, the first stars begin to tentatively peek through the haze. They are ancient, distant, and perfectly silent. To the exhausted men below, those tiny pinpricks of light are a profound comfort. The stars do not care about the steel, or the noise, or the struggles of the day. They simply shine, offering a quiet, eternal promise that the world will keep turning, that the night will always come to offer them rest. The great iron machines begin to cool. As the metal contracts in the evening air, it makes soft, rhythmic ticking and pinging sounds. It is a gentle, soothing lullaby, a far cry from the roaring engines of the morning. The men use the still warm steel tracks of the panzers as backrests. They pull their heavy woolen coats around their shoulders, seeking the physical warmth of the men sitting beside them. They lean their heads together, resting their tired minds against the shoulders of their brothers. The deafening storm has passed. The world has shrunk back down to a manageable size, the space of a shared blanket, the warmth of a steel track, the comforting sound of a friend breathing in the dark. They close their heavy eyes, letting the soft, dark velvet of the night wrap completely around them. And there, beneath the ancient stars and the fading smoke, the men of the Fourth Panzer Army drift into a deep, dreamless sleep, finding their quiet shelter at the end of the world. The golden leaves did not care that the men were walking in the wrong direction, they simply fell, covering the weary iron in a blanket of quiet rust. The great, open breath of the summer steppe has finally faded away, replaced by the crisp, fragrant chill of the autumn wind. The sky is no longer a blinding, heavy blue. It is a soft, bruised gray, woven with pale threads of silver clouds that drift lazily toward the west. And it is toward the west that the men of the Fourth Panzer Army are walking. This is the season of the retreat. It is a gentle, melancholic winding down of the year, mirroring the deep, quiet exhaustion in the hearts of the men. They have turned their backs on the vastness of the East, and now they are retracing their own footsteps. To walk back through a land you once crossed is a haunting, poetic experience. Months ago, when they first marched down these dirt roads, the world was green, and their hearts were light. They were boys filled with the nervous, humming energy of the unknown. Now, they return as ghosts of their former selves. They look at the landscape not with the wide eyes of explorers, but with the hollow, tender gaze of men who simply want to go home. The road leads them to the banks of a wide, dark river. The water here does not rush or roar. It moves with a slow, heavy, ancient grace, black as polished obsidian beneath the autumn sky. stretching across this immense, cold divide is a pontoon bridge, a fragile ribbon of lashed wood and canvas floating delicately on the surface of the deep. Listen to the sound of the crossing. It is a hypnotic, rhythmic symphony. Thud. 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 The hollow, echoing footfalls of thousands of heavy boots stepping onto the damp wooden planks. The wood groans softly under the weight, a gentle, complaining creak that blends with the gentle sloshing of the river against the hollow metal pontoons. The bridge sways. It is not a violent rocking, but a slow, sweeping cradle swing, moving side to side with the current. For the men, stepping onto this swaying path is a profound psychological crossing. To walk over the dark water is to put a boundary between themselves and the world they are leaving behind. A young soldier pauses halfway across the bridge. He steps slightly to the side, letting the slow column move past him, and rests his calloused hands on the thick, damp rope of the railing. He looks down into the swirling, black water. The surface reflects the gray sky and the brilliant, coppery leaves of the oak trees lining the distant shore. He reaches into the deep pocket of his woolen greatcoat and pulls out a small, smooth stone. He had picked it up on the furthest edge of the steppe, a tiny piece of the endless horizon. He holds it in his palm for a long moment, feeling its cold weight, feeling the immense distance it represents. And then, with a slow, gentle opening of his fingers, he lets it go. He watches the small stone fall, hitting the dark water with a tiny, silent splash, disappearing instantly into the depths. It is a private, unceremonious goodbye to the east. He closes his eyes, taking a deep breath of the cold river air. Suddenly, he feels a hand on his shoulder. It is warm, steady, and grounding. He opens his eyes to see the tired, soot-stained face of his closest friend, a boy from his own village. His friend does not ask why he stopped. He simply gives the shoulder a firm, reassuring squeeze, a gesture that says, "Leave it to the river. We are walking toward the sunset now." The young soldier nods, pulling his collar up against the chill, and falls back into the rhythmic, swaying march across the wood. Once on the western bank, the road takes them into the deep, rolling woodlands. The trees have erupted in a staggering display of autumn fire. The birches are towering columns of pure, shimmering gold. The oaks are bruised purple and deep crimson. As the wind moves through the branches, it shakes the dying leaves loose, sending them drifting down in a slow, twirling, colorful rain. The leaves fall upon the men, resting softly on their helmets and their shoulders. And they fall upon the machines. The towering panzers, which once looked so invincible and terrifying, have been humbled by the journey. Their gray paint is chipped and scarred, revealing wide, blooming patches of orange rust that perfectly match the colors of the dying forest. They are no longer weapons of war, they are weary, iron beasts of burden, seeking a place to rest. The fallen leaves stick to the damp, rusted metal of the sloping armor. They gather in the corners of the vision slits and accumulate on the broad, flat fenders. The earth is quietly reclaiming the machines, camouflaging them not for battle, but for hibernation. The drivers and mechanics walk beside their tanks. With a quiet, lingering affection. They pat the cold, rusty steel as one might stroke the neck of a faithful, exhausted horse. They know the engines are failing, that the tracks are worn thin, but they rely on these iron companions to shield them from the wind. As the column winds through the woods, they pass a small, ruined stone wall overgrown with dying ivy. An older corporal, walking with a slight, rhythmic limp, stops entirely. He stares at the stones. He knows this wall. In the bright, hopeful days of the early summer, he had sat on this exact spot. He remembers the feeling of the warm sun on his face as he smoked a cigarette and watched a flock of white birds circle the nearby fields. He remembers the younger, unbroken version of himself who sat there. He steps out of the line and walks slowly toward the ruins. He reaches out, tracing his fingers over the cold, rough surface of the stones. He finds a small, shallow groove scratched into the rock, his own initials, carved with the tip of a bayonet on a lazy afternoon that feels like it belonged to another lifetime. To stand here and look at the mark left by his own hand is to confront a ghost. He touches the carved letters, feeling a profound, poetic melancholy wash over him. He has survived, but the boy who carved those letters is gone, left behind somewhere in the endless dust and the freezing snow. He rests his forehead against the cold stone for just a second, a silent prayer of gratitude and grief, before turning back to join the slow, shuffling procession west. The afternoon light begins to fail, turning the golden woodland into a shadowy realm of amber and deep brown. The air grows sharper, carrying the distinct, earthy smell of decaying leaves and impending frost. The order is passed down the line, a soft murmur that ripples through the tired men, halt. They do not make camp with the frantic, fearful energy of the winter, nor the exhausted collapse of the summer. They settle into the autumn woods with a slow, deliberate peace. They gather beneath the wide canopies of the great oaks, seeking shelter in the deep, soft piles of fallen leaves. Small, careful fires are built from dry birch bark and fallen twigs. They are not roaring bonfires, just tiny, flickering pockets of warmth that cast a soft, orange glow against the white trunks of the trees. The wood smoke is sweet and fragrant, a nostalgic scent that instantly transports the men to the autumns of their childhoods, to the smell of burning leaves in quiet village squares and the warmth of roasted chestnuts. Around one of these small fires, 3 men sit shoulder to shoulder, sharing the warmth. One of them pulls a small, shriveled apple from his pack. It is bruised and soft, a scavenged treasure from an abandoned orchard miles back. He takes his pocket knife and carefully, painstakingly, slices the apple into 3 perfectly equal, paper-thin slivers. He passes them to his friends. They do not eat immediately. They hold the tiny pieces of fruit, inhaling the faint, sweet memory of the orchard, before placing them on their tongues. The crisp, tart flavor of the apple is a burst of pure, concentrated life in the middle of the fading world. It is a tiny, beautiful feast, shared with the quiet reverence of a holy sacrament. Nearby, resting his back against the rusted track of a silent transport truck, a soldier is writing a letter by the fading light. He holds a small, battered notebook on his knee. He does not write about the retreat. He does not write about the dark river they crossed, or the profound weariness that makes his hands tremble as he holds the pencil. He loves his family too much to burden them with his sorrow. Instead, he writes about the beauty of the dying year. My dearest, he writes, his handwriting soft and flowing. The autumn here is more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. We are walking through forests of pure gold. The leaves fall like a gentle rain, and they cover the earth in a soft, bright blanket. The air smells like wood smoke and pine. He pauses, looking up at the canopy above, watching a single, crimson leaf detach and float lazily down through the firelight. We are moving west now. Every step I take is a step closer to the setting sun, and a step closer to you. I trace the path of the sun in the sky, and I know it is shining on our roof. Do not worry for me. The woods are quiet, and the men are good to one another. Keep a fire burning in the hearth. I am walking toward the light. He folds the letter, tucking it safely into his tunic, right over his heart. He lets his head fall back against the cold steel of the truck, letting his eyes drift shut. The twilight deepens into a heavy, velvety night. The fires burn down to soft, pulsing red embers. The woodland grows incredibly still, insulated by the thick carpet of leaves on the forest floor. The gentle rustling of the branches above is a soothing, rhythmic lullaby, whispering ancient secrets to the sleeping men. They lie close together, cooling their body heat, wrapping their woolen blankets tightly around their shoulders. The fallen leaves gather around them, tucking them into the earth, holding them safe in a golden, fragrant embrace. The autumn of retreat is a season of quiet surrender, not to an enemy, but to the overwhelming need for rest. As the men of the Fourth Panzer Army sleep beneath the ancient oaks, the wind sings softly through the rusted armor of their machines. The dark river is behind them, the vast east is a fading dream, and the long, poetic walk homeward continues in the peaceful, silent dark. To step into the birch woods in the dead of winter is to walk into a quiet, frozen dream woven from pale paper and silver shadows. The endless, open expanse of the steppe has finally been left behind, replaced by a dense, silent architecture of wood and frost. Here, thousands upon thousands of slender white trunks rise from the deep snow, standing shoulder to shoulder like a vast, ghostly army. Their bark is the color of old bone and fresh milk, marked with dark, horizontal scars that look like the closed eyes of ancient spirits. In the dim, slanting light of the winter afternoon, the forest does not look real. It looks like an exquisite, charcoal sketch drawn upon a canvas of absolute white. Into this pale, silent sanctuary walks the Fourth Panzer Army. They move slowly, drifting through the narrow corridors between the trees like shadows seeking a place to rest. The great iron machines, so loud and imposing on the open plains, are strangely subdued here. The drivers weave them carefully among the fragile trunks, their heavy steel tracks biting softly into the deep, powdery drifts. The armor of the panzers is coated in a thick, crystalline layer of white frost, camouflaging them perfectly against the surrounding woods. They are no longer beasts of war, they have become a natural part of the winter landscape, silent, sleeping boulders of ice hidden in the pale forest. The woods offer a precious, desperate camouflage from the eyes in the sky. But this camouflage comes with a profound and heavy psychological cost. On the open steppe, despite the terror of its vastness, a man could at least see the horizon. He could look up and see the great dome of the sky. But here, the world is violently compressed. The thousands of vertical white lines create a beautiful, suffocating cage. The dense canopy of bare, twisting branches blocks out the heavens, trapping the men in a state of perpetual, gray twilight. It is a haunting, claustrophobic isolation. They are completely cut off from the rest of the earth, swallowed whole by the silent white trees. Listen to the stillness of the birch woods. It is not the empty, ringing silence of the plains. It is a heavy, expectant quiet. The only sounds are the slow, rhythmic crunch of heavy boots breaking the crust of the snow, the soft, metallic ticking of the cooling engines, and the occasional, sharp crack of a frozen branch snapping in the deep freeze. It sounds like a dry bone breaking in the dark, echoing endlessly through the pale trunks. A young infantryman leans his heavy, exhausted body against the trunk of a large birch. His uniform is a patchwork of torn wool, canvas, and scavenged white cloth, tied around his waist with a piece of frayed rope. He pulls off his thick, frost-stiffened mitten, exposing a hand that is pale, cracked, and trembling with the cold. He reaches out and presses his bare palm against the bark of the tree. The birch bark is peeling in thin, papery horizontal strips. It feels incredibly smooth beneath his rough fingers, like the pages of a very old, very precious book. He closes his eyes, letting the freezing texture ground him in the moment. As he feels the peeling bark, he does not see the desolate, frozen forest of the east. He sees the backyard of his childhood home. He remembers the single, beautiful birch tree that stood near his mother's garden gate. He remembers how its leaves shimmered like silver coins in the gentle summer wind. He remembers hiding behind its trunk when playing games with his brothers, the smell of the green grass, and the distant, comforting sound of his mother calling them in for supper. A sharp, sudden ache rises in his throat. It is the heavy, beautiful burden of homesickness, made infinitely sharper by the physical touch of the tree. He gently pulls a loose strip of the white bark away from the trunk. He folds it carefully, slipping the fragile piece of wood into the breast pocket of his tunic, placing it right over his beating heart. It is a tiny, physical piece of a memory, a tether to a warmer, kinder world, hidden away to keep him company in the frozen dark. As the gray afternoon bleeds into evening, the temperature in the woods begins to plummet. The cold here is different from the cold of the open plains. It is a damp, settling chill that seeps out of the very wood of the trees, creeping through the soles of their boots and settling deep into their joints. They cannot build large fires. The flames would cast dancing orange shadows against the white trees, revealing their hidden sanctuary to the world beyond the woods. Instead, survival becomes an exercise in quiet, desperate ingenuity. The men dig deep, narrow pits into the snow, packing the sides until they are as hard as ice. At the bottom of these tiny, hidden wells, they build minuscule fires using twigs, dried moss, and strips of the papery birch bark. The bark catches quickly, burning with a bright, smokeless intensity. The men huddle around these tiny embers, kneeling in the snow, leaning their faces over the pits to capture every precious wisp of rising heat. The glow of these hidden fires illuminates their faces from below, casting deep, dramatic shadows over their hollowed cheeks and exhausted eyes. They look like an ancient brotherhood of monks, performing a quiet, sacred ritual in the heart of a frozen cathedral. Watch the two soldiers kneeling by the track of a silent half-track. One of them is a young boy, his face wrapped so thickly in scarves and rags that only his bright, terrified eyes are visible. He is shivering violently, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that shakes his entire frame. The cold has bypassed his meager clothing and gripped his very bones. The older man beside him watches him for a moment. His own face is drawn and pale, his lips cracked from the wind. Without a word, the older man reaches up and begins to unwrap the thick, knitted woolen scarf from his own neck. It is a beautiful scarf, a deep, rich burgundy that stands out starkly against the gray and white of the woods. It was knitted by his wife, holding the scent of their small apartment and the warmth of her hands in every careful stitch. The older man pulls it free, exposing his own neck to the biting, freezing air. He leans forward and gently, meticulously, wraps the burgundy wool around the young boy's head and shoulders. He tucks the ends tightly into the collar of the boy's coat, ensuring no freezing air can find its way in. He pats the boy firmly on the shoulder, a silent, powerful gesture of protection. "I have you," the touch says. "You will not freeze tonight." The young boy stops shivering for just a moment. He looks at the older man, his eyes shining with unshed tears in the dim light. He reaches up and touches the soft burgundy wool, pulling it closer to his face. It is a moment of pure, blinding humanity, a tiny, magnificent spark of love and sacrifice in the middle of an endlessly cold world. The night deepens, and the birch woods are plunged into an absolute, velvety blackness. The moon rises, hidden behind a thick veil of winter clouds, casting a soft, diffuse, blue-gray luminescence over the forest. The white trunks of the trees glow faintly in the dark, standing like silent, watchful guardians over the sleeping army. In the hollowed-out root system of a massive, fallen birch, a soldier has made a tiny shelter. He has draped his canvas shelter half over the roots, creating a small, dark cave insulated by the snow. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of damp wool and earth. He holds a small, battered flashlight, its lens covered with a piece of red cloth to dim the beam. By this meager, bloody light, he is writing a letter on a piece of scavenged, lined paper. His hands are so cold they can barely grip the pencil, and his handwriting is a shaky, jagged scrawl. He does not write about the shivering, or the fear, or the profound, haunting isolation of the ghost woods. He writes to his younger sister. "My little bird," he writes, his breath forming tiny silver clouds in the red light. "We are camping in a great forest of white trees tonight. It is the most beautiful place I have ever seen. The trees look like they are made of pure snow, and they stand so tall they touch the sky. It is very quiet here. The forest is keeping us safe, hiding us from the wind." He pauses, bringing his numb fingers to his mouth to blow a breath of warm air over them. "I remember today how we used to peel the bark from the birch trees by the river and write secret messages on them. I have a piece of bark with me now, and I am holding it as I write to you. I want you to know that even though I am far away, I am walking through a world of magic, just like the stories we used to read. Be good for Mother. I will bring you a piece of this white forest when I come home." He folds the letter, his stiff fingers struggling with the paper, and places it inside his heavy tunic. He clicks off the small flashlight. The absolute darkness rushes back in, heavy and complete. He lies back against the frozen earth, pulling his thin blanket up over his chin. Outside his tiny canvas cave, the forest is completely still. The men have formed their sleeping huddles, pressing themselves together between the pale trunks and beneath the icy steel of the panzers. They weave their arms and legs together, creating a single, shared warmth against the devastating cold. Their breathing slows, falling into a deep, synchronized rhythm. Thousands of chests rising and falling together. Thousands of soft, silver plumes of breath drifting upward, curling around the birch branches, fading gently into the night. The shadows in the birch woods are long and deep, hiding the scars of the retreat, hiding the rusted iron, hiding the weary faces of the men. The woods are a cage of white wood and ice, a haunting reminder of how far they have walked from the sun. But in the deep, quiet hours of the night, the forest also becomes a cradle. It holds them softly in its frozen arms, offering them a silent, absolute peace. They sleep, wrapped in the borrowed warmth of scarves, the memory of summer gardens, and the quiet, unyielding love of the brothers beside them. And as the snow begins to fall again, a delicate, powdery dusting that covers their tracks and softens the sharp edges of the world, the men of the Fourth Panzer Army drift away into a gentle, dreamless sanctuary, safe within the whispering shadows of the white wood. The earth did not wake from its long winter sleep with a gentle stretch, but with a heavy, weeping sigh that turned the world to dark water. The ice that had held the great steppe in a breathless, frozen grip for so many months finally began to fracture. The sky, which had been a harsh, blinding canopy of white, softened into a pale, bruised gray, and the rain began to fall. It was not a fierce, angry storm. It was a slow, steady, and entirely relentless drizzle. It fell in a delicate, silver curtain, washing away the last stubborn drifts of snow, melting the frost from the iron, and waking the sleeping earth beneath. But the spring did not bring the firm, green fields of the year before. The earth, having been frozen so deeply, could not drink the falling rain. And so, the world simply dissolved. The dirt roads, the sweeping plains, the pathways through the quiet birch woods, they all surrendered to the wet, turning into a vast, seemingly bottomless ocean of thick, dark mud. It was a heavy, clinging mire, the color of wet coal and rusted iron. It rose up to swallow the landscape, a slow, dark tide that erased the boundaries between the road and the fields. For the men of the Fourth Panzer Army, the long walk west had suddenly become a quiet, agonizing struggle against the very earth itself. The great iron machines, the panzers and the heavy transports, were brought to a slow, suffocating halt. Their massive steel tracks, designed to crush stone and conquer distances, spun helplessly in the deep, yielding muck. The engines whined, a high, strained pitch that was quickly swallowed by the wet, heavy sound of the churning mud. The earth was reclaiming them, pulling them down into its dark, cool embrace. With the machines silenced and bogged down to their axles, the burden of the march fell entirely upon the shoulders of the men. To walk in this mud is to perform an act of sheer, stubborn will with every single step. It is a slow, rhythmic battle. You sink down past your ankles, sometimes up to your knees, into the freezing, clinging paste. When you try to lift your foot, the mud holds on. It pulls back with a powerful, suctioning grip, demanding a heavy toll of energy just to break free. Squelch. Pull. Step. That is the new rhythm of their lives. It is a hypnotic, deeply exhausting dance. Look at the column of men wading through this dark sea. Their uniforms, once gray and field green, are now completely coated in a thick, uniform layer of wet brown clay. It covers their boots, their trousers, their hands, and their faces. They look like statues molded from the very earth they are struggling to cross, a slow-moving procession of clay figures walking through a weeping world. Yet, within this heavy, relentless struggle, a profound and quiet heroism blooms. It is not the heroism of the battlefield. It is the gentle, unbreakable heroism of brotherhood. Up ahead, a wooden supply cart, drawn by exhausted horses and carrying the precious, meager rations for the week, has sunk deep into a rut. The mud has swallowed the wooden-spoked wheels entirely. The horses stand with their heads bowed, their wet flanks heaving, unable to pull the heavy load any further. The column does not leave the cart behind. They do not shout or curse the sky. A group of 6 men wade forward through the knee-deep mire. They do not wait for an order. They gather around the back and the sides of the sunken wagon. They press their chests and their shoulders against the wet, splintered wood of the tailgate. They are so tired. Their muscles ache with a deep, vibrating fatigue. But they look at one another, sharing a silent, knowing glance beneath the brims of their dripping helmets. One of the men, an older sergeant with mud caked in his beard, gives a soft, rhythmic nod. 1, 2, 3. They push together. They dig their boots deep into the shifting mud, searching for anything solid to brace against, and they heave. They pour every last ounce of their fading strength into the wood. The muscles in their necks strain, their breath comes in ragged, synchronized gasps, forming pale clouds in the damp, chilly air. For a long, agonizing moment, the cart does not move. The earth refuses to let go. But the men do not stop pushing. They lean into each other, pooling their strength, a single, breathing organism fighting the gravity of the world. Slowly, with a loud, sucking groan, the mud finally yields. The wooden wheels turn, slipping and sliding, and the cart inches forward onto slightly higher ground. The men collapse against the sides of the wagon, chest heaving, rain washing the fresh sweat from their faces. They do not cheer. They simply reach out, their hands heavy with mud, and clasp each other's arms. It is a touch that speaks volumes. It says, we are still here. We are moving forward. We are carrying each other. Further down the line, a younger soldier, barely more than a boy, suddenly stops. With a soft, defeated sound, his right foot slips deep into a hidden pocket of the mire. When he tries to pull it free, the thick mud holds fast, and his foot slides right out of his heavy leather boot. He stands there in the pouring rain, balancing on one leg like a tired, gray heron, his woolen socks soaking through instantly in the cold wet. He looks down at the smooth surface of the mud, which has already closed over the spot where his boot disappeared. A look of quiet, absolute despair washes over his youthful face. To lose a boot in this world is a catastrophe. He does not have the strength to dig for it. He simply lowers his head, the rain running off his helmet, ready to surrender to the wet and the cold. But he is not alone. The man walking behind him, a quiet corporal who hasn't spoken a word all morning, steps forward. Without a moment's hesitation, the corporal wades into the deepest part of the puddle. He plunges his bare hands and arms deep into the freezing, opaque muck, feeling blindly beneath the surface. He digs, his shoulders straining, until his fingers brush against the heavy leather. With a grunt of effort, he pulls the boot free from the earth's grip. He wades back to the young boy. He does not simply hand the boot over. He kneels down in the mud, entirely indifferent to the cold water soaking into his own trousers. He takes the boy's wet, shivering foot, wipes the worst of the mud away with the edge of his own sleeve, and gently guides the foot back into the heavy boot. He looks up at the boy and gives a small, tired smile. He pats the boy's knee, stands up, and wipes his muddy hands on his coat. It is an act of staggering tenderness, a moment of pure, parental care offered in the middle of a desolate wasteland. The boy's eyes fill with tears that mix invisibly with the falling rain. He nods his thanks, a profound gratitude swelling in his chest, and together, they step back into the rhythm of the march. As the afternoon light begins to fade, the gray sky darkens into a deep, bruised charcoal. The rain does not stop, but it softens into a gentle, whispering mist that hangs low over the fields. The order is given to halt for the night. There is no dry ground to be found. The earth is a saturated sponge. But the men have learned to make peace with the wet. They seek the meager shelter of the silent transport trucks, crawling beneath the canvas canopies or stretching their ground sheets across the high, rusted axles to create tiny, damp tents in the mud. Underneath one of these canvas lean-tos, 3 men are huddled close together. They sit on wooden ammunition crates to keep themselves just inches above the waterlogged earth. A small, tin lantern hangs from the axle above them, casting a weak, buttery yellow light that pushes back the shadows. One of the men has a small, leather-bound journal resting on his knees. He is trying to write a letter, holding his pen carefully so the damp air does not blur the ink. He writes to his mother, a woman who loves to tend her flower beds in the early spring. He looks down at his hands, which are permanently stained with the dark soil of the steppe, and he smiles a soft, wistful smile. "Mother," he writes, his hand moving slowly in the dim light. "The spring has come, and the rain is falling. The world here is nothing but earth and water. We are walking through an ocean of mud, and it clings to everything we own. It is so heavy, this earth." He pauses, listening to the gentle, rhythmic drumming of the rain against the canvas above his head. It is a soothing, deeply peaceful sound, a lullaby from the sky. "But tonight, sitting here in the damp, I thought of your garden. I remembered how you used to turn the soil in the spring, how rich and dark it looked beneath your spade. I remembered the smell of the wet dirt, and how you told me that the rain was just the sky giving the earth a drink so the seeds could grow. The mud here is cold and heavy, but I hold on to the thought of your garden. I know that beneath all this water, the earth is preparing for the sun. I am carrying that hope with me. I am safe, and I am warm beside my friends." He closes the journal, wrapping it carefully in a piece of oiled cloth to keep the moisture out. He slides it back into his pack. The lantern flickers, throwing soft, dancing shadows across the faces of the 3 men. They do not have a fire tonight, but the shared warmth of their bodies, pressed shoulder to shoulder in the tiny space, is enough to keep the deepest chill at bay. They share a single tin of cold meat, passing it back and forth, eating slowly and quietly in the gentle bloom. The relentless struggle against the mud has exhausted them beyond measure. Their bodies are heavy, aching with the effort of the day. But their spirits are anchored by an unbreakable bond. The mud has stripped away the last pretenses of rank and pride, leaving only a pure, elemental reliance on one another. They are brothers, forged in the deep earth and the falling rain. As the night deepens, the lantern is extinguished, leaving them in absolute, velvety darkness. The sound of the rain becomes a continuous, comforting hum, wrapping the encampment in a blanket of white noise. The men lean their heads against one another. They close their heavy eyes, feeling the slow, steady rise and fall of their companions' chests. In the dark, the mud does not matter. The rain does not matter. They have found a tiny island of safety in the center of a weeping world. And so, held securely in the quiet, unyielding embrace of their brotherhood, the men of the Fourth Panzer Army drift away into sleep. They dream of dry roads, of warm sunlight breaking through the clouds, and of the green gardens waiting for them at the end of the long, muddy march home. The sky did not fall with a sudden, deafening crash. It descended slowly, a heavy, gray curtain settling softly over a profoundly weary world. For so long, the men of the Fourth Panzer Army had carried the weight of the horizon on their shoulders. They had marched beneath the blinding suns of summer and the crushing, frozen stars of winter, believing that their sheer will could conquer the endless expanse of the East. But there comes a quiet, haunting moment when the illusion breaks. It is a gentle fracturing, a slow unraveling of the great endeavor. The world they had built out of iron and order simply begins to dissolve, melting away like morning mist over the vast and different steppe. You can feel this fracture in the air. The confident, rhythmic roar of the great march has faded into a disjointed, echoing silence. The columns are no longer a sweeping tide, they are fragile, fragmented streams of exhausted men wandering through a landscape that is slowly, methodically reclaiming them. The earth is taking back its dominance. The deep ruts carved by thousands of wheels are softening, smoothing out beneath the sighing wind, as if the step is gently erasing the memory of their passing. Look at the machines that once defined their pride. By the side of a lonely, winding dirt track, a massive panzer has finally come to rest. It has not been conquered by fire, but by pure, unyielding exhaustion. The engine, which has carried it across thousands of miles of dust and snow, simply let out a low, metallic sigh and fell permanently silent. A mechanic, a man whose hands have been stained dark with oil and grease for years, stands beside the great steel beast. He does not reach for his tools. He knows that no amount of desperate turning or hammering can wake the machine now. The iron has given everything it had to give. He takes off his heavy, soiled gloves and presses his bare hand against the sloped armor. The metal is cold, already matching the temperature of the cooling earth. He traces the deep scars and the blooms of orange rust with a quiet, lingering affection. It is a slow, deeply personal farewell. This machine was his home, his fortress, his constant companion through the loudest storms of his life. With a heavy, resigned sigh, he pulls his canvas rucksack from the fender. He leaves the heavy steel hatches wide open, offering the dark, empty belly of the Panzer to the sweeping winds and the drifting seeds of the wild grass. He turns his back on the iron and begins to walk, joining the slow, shuffling procession of men moving west. The machine will slowly drown in the tall grass, becoming just another quiet hill on the endless plains, swallowed by the vastness of the world. As the physical armor of their army falls away, the men are left entirely exposed to the immense, crushing scale of the sky. The heavens above them seem to grow heavier with each passing day. The clouds are low and dark, pressing down upon the retreating columns, making the men feel unimaginably small. They are tiny, fragile specks adrift in an ocean of gray and faded green. In the face of this overwhelming vastness, as the structure of their world crumbles, the men do the only thing they can do. They cling desperately to one another. The superficial boundaries of rank and unit have vanished, washed away by the sheer necessity of survival. They walk shoulder to shoulder, leaning their weight against the men beside them. When a soldier stumbles, his legs finally betraying him after so many countless miles, he does not fall to the ground. Instantly, two pairs of hands reach out from the gray twilight, gripping his heavy canvas webbing, pulling him upright. No words are spoken. There is no energy left for speech. There is only the firm, reassuring squeeze of a hand on a shoulder, the shared, ragged rhythm of their breathing, and the unspoken vow that they will not let each other slip away into the deep grass. They become a single, breathing entity, bound together by a quiet, unbreakable love that thrives in the absolute darkest of times. To protect their minds from the falling sky, they retreat inward, building tiny, beautiful sanctuaries out of their memories. A young infantryman walks with his head bowed against the wind. His right hand is thrust deep into the pocket of his tattered greatcoat, his fingers wrapped tightly around a small, silver object. It is a pocket watch, passed down to him by his grandfather. The watch has not ticked in months. The delicate internal springs rusted and froze somewhere in the deep winter. The hands are permanently frozen at 4:15. But as the young man walks, he rubs his thumb over the smooth, worn silver of the casing. He stares at the muddy boots of the man in front of him, but in his mind, he is miles and years away. He is sitting in a quiet, sunlit parlor. It is 4:15 on a Sunday afternoon. He can hear the soft, melodic clinking of porcelain teacups. He can smell the rich, dark aroma of roasted coffee and the sweet, buttery scent of a freshly baked cake cooling on a wire rack. He remembers the exact sound of his grandmother's laughter, a bright, musical note that used to fill the room. He holds onto that silent watch as if it were a physical tether keeping him attached to the earth. In a world where time has become nothing but a blur of endless marching and fading light, that frozen hour of peace is his anchor. It is a quiet, profound act of resilience, carrying a perfect, sunlit afternoon in his pocket through the bleakest landscape on earth. As the late afternoon slowly bleeds into twilight, the order to halt ripples down the line. It is barely a whisper, carried on the wind. There are no structured encampments anymore. The men simply stop walking and sink into the tall, dry grass of the steppe. The wind sighs over them, a long, mournful sound that rustles the heavy coats and the canvas packs. The light fails quickly, turning the world into a realm of deep, bruised purple and charcoal gray. Sitting cross-legged in the sea of grass, an older corporal carefully unwraps a small, oiled cloth. Inside lies a letter from his wife. It is so worn, so deeply creased and fragile, that the paper feels as soft as ancient silk. He handles it with agonizing care, holding it up to catch the last, meager rays of the dying sun. He has read the words 100 times, but tonight, as the world fractures around him, he needs to see her handwriting. He needs to see the physical proof that a gentler world still exists somewhere beyond this heavy sky. She does not write of the war. She writes of the autumn rain falling on the slate roof of their home. She writes of the apple trees in the garden, how the branches are heavy with red fruit, and how she has left the wooden ladder leaning against the trunk, waiting for him to climb it. She writes of the quiet evenings, sitting by the hearth, watching the embers glow, keeping the fire warm for his return. A single, quiet tear slips down the corporal's dust-caked cheek. It is not a tear of despair, but of a profound, overwhelming love. The vast, empty steppe surrounds him, threatening to swallow his spirit, but the words on that fragile page are a warm, glowing shield. He traces her name with his calloused thumb, feeling the faint indentation of the pen on the paper. He folds the letter, wraps it back in its protective cloth, and places it squarely over his heart. He knows that the road ahead is dark, and that the sky is heavy, but he also knows that he is carrying the warmth of that hearth fire inside his chest. Night falls over the retreating army, a heavy, velvet blanket that obscures the ruins of their grand march. The sky above clears just enough to reveal the ancient, glittering dust of the stars. They are so far away, so perfectly cold and indifferent to the struggles of the men below. The vastness of the steppe reclaims its absolute dominance. The small, ragged clusters of resting men look like tiny, insignificant islands in a massive, dark ocean of grass. The wind blows uninterrupted from horizon to horizon, singing a soothing, lonely lullaby. The men huddle together in the deep grass, pulling their thin blankets and heavy coats over their heads. They press their backs together, intertwining their arms and legs, seeking the physical reassurance of life in the freezing dark. They listen to the steady, rhythmic beating of each other's hearts. In the face of the falling sky, this shared warmth is their only defiance. They do not speak of the fractures. They do not speak of the lost machines or the miles they have surrendered. They simply close their heavy, exhausted eyes. They dream of the letters in their pockets. They dream of frozen pocket watches and sunlit parlors. They dream of apple orchards and the soft, familiar voices of the people who love them. The world outside may be crumbling, the great army may be dissolving into the wind, but in the quiet sanctuary of their minds, they are completely safe. And as the deep, peaceful night stretches on, the vast steppe holds them in its quiet, dark embrace, whispering that the long day is finally over, and that it is time, at last, to rest. The air changed first, a subtle shift in the wind that carried the forgotten scent of pine needles, damp cobblestones, and the sweet, heavy promise of rain on familiar soil. It is the deepest, quietest hour of the night. The moon is hidden behind a veil of soft, charcoal clouds, wrapping the world in a cloak of absolute, velvety darkness. Through this gentle obscurity, the men of the Fourth Panzer Army are walking. But their footsteps do not sound like the heavy, rhythmic drumming of a conquering force, nor do they carry the desperate, dragging weight of the deep winter retreat. Listen to them moving in the dark. It is a soft, rhythmic shuffle, the sound of exhausted men who have finally found the edges of a world they understand. The earth beneath their worn boots has changed. For thousands of miles, they had marched across the alien, endless immensity of the deep steppe, a land that felt too vast, too wild, and completely indifferent to their existence. But tonight, the dirt road is narrow. It curves gently around the natural contours of the hills, bordered by low, ancient stone walls built by hands they might have known. They are crossing the borders in the dark. There are no grand signs to announce this homecoming, no trumpets sounding in the twilight. There is only an invisible line drawn in the damp earth, a boundary that shifts the weight in a man's chest from a crushing burden to a profound, trembling relief. A young soldier walking near the front of the column reaches out his hand in the dark. His fingertips brush against the top of a wooden fence post. He stops. The wood is smooth, weathered by the gentle rains of the west, not blasted by the biting sands of the eastern plains. He slides his hand further down the fence line and feels the familiar, twisting shape of climbing ivy. He closes his eyes, letting the simple, tactile sensation wash over him. It is a texture from his childhood. It is the same ivy that grew on the walls of his primary school. He takes a deep, slow breath, pulling the cool night air into his lungs. It does not smell of dry dust or burning ruins. It smells of wet leaves and rich, dark loam. A quiet sob, entirely devoid of sorrow, catches in his throat. He does not weep aloud. He simply rests his forehead against the damp wood of the fence post for one long, beautiful moment. The sheer, overwhelming realization is beginning to set in. He has survived the infinite void. He has walked to the edge of the world and somehow found his way back. He steps back into the line, his footsteps feeling infinitesimally lighter, carrying the profound grace of the familiar into the dark. Further back in the column, an older corporal walks with his hand resting lightly on the shoulder of the man beside him. This touch is not just for guidance in the pitch black, it is an anchor. As they cross back into these known lands, a strange, beautiful melancholy begins to walk beside them. The endless plains of the east are behind them, but they have not truly left them. The steppe has taken root inside their minds. As they walk past the familiar silhouettes of sloping barn roofs and narrow church spires, their minds overlay the images of the vast, golden sunflower fields and the blinding, white blizzards. They carry the immense, terrifying beauty of the open horizon within them. The corporal looks up at the sky. Through a small break in the clouds, a single, bright star is visible. It is the same star he watched from a freezing trench thousands of miles away. He thinks of the men they left behind in the snow, the boys who were swallowed by the deep, dark rivers and the endless dust. He realizes, with a heavy, poetic sorrow, that he is carrying their memories back into the light. He reaches into the breast pocket of his tunic. His fingers brush against a small, smooth pebble he picked up on the banks of the Volga. It is cold and hard, a tiny fragment of the end of the world. He rolls it between his thumb and forefinger, a physical tether to the ghosts of the long march. He makes a silent, sacred promise to the night sky: I will remember you. I will carry this stone to the garden of my home, and I will let it rest in the soft earth, so you may finally be at peace. The road gently slopes downward, leading the tired column toward a small, stone bridge crossing a narrow, singing stream. The sound of the water is not the heavy, ominous rolling of the great eastern rivers. It is a cheerful, babbling murmur, rushing playfully over smooth, round pebbles. As the men cross the bridge, the hollow clop of their boots echoes softly against the stone arches. In the middle of the bridge, a soldier pauses. He leans over the low stone parapet, peering down into the dark water. He cannot see his reflection, but he can hear the music of the stream. He unclips his metal canteen, which has tasted of tin, rust, and melted snow for so many seasons. He reaches down and dips it into the running water. He brings it to his lips and takes a long, slow drink. The water is freezing, crisp, and impossibly sweet. It tastes of limestone and rain. It tastes of home. He lowers the canteen, his hands trembling slightly, and turns to the man waiting patiently behind him. He offers the canteen without a word. The second man takes it, drinks deeply, and closes his eyes. In the darkness, they share a soft, unseen smile. The heavy armor of their survival, the rigid, emotional walls they built to withstand the horrors of the steppe, are finally beginning to crack. In this quiet, shared communion of familiar water, they are allowing themselves to become soft again. They are allowing themselves to feel the gentle vulnerability of hope. The march continues, winding deeper into the sanctuary of the known world. The exhaustion in their bones is absolute, a weariness so profound it feels as though their very marrow has turned to lead. Yet, they do not want to stop. Every footstep in the dark is a reclaiming of their past. Every crunch of gravel beneath their boots is a quiet victory over the silence of the East. In the back of a slow-moving, canvas-covered wagon, a young man lies wrapped in a thin, worn blanket. The gentle swaying of the cart rocks him like a cradle. He is too tired to walk, his strength entirely spent on the long roads behind them. He is holding a letter. It is too dark to read the words, but he does not need the light. He traces the shape of the envelope in his hands. It is addressed to a house with a blue door at the end of a cobblestone street. For months, that address felt like a mythical place, a fairy tale he whispered to himself to keep the cold at bay. But tonight, the rocking of the wagon and the smell of the air tell him that the fairy tale is becoming real. He is no longer just dreaming of the house with the blue door, he is traveling toward it. He imagines his mother sweeping the front steps in the early morning light. He imagines the smell of baking bread drifting from the open kitchen window. He holds the letter to his chest, feeling the steady, rhythmic beating of his own heart. The fear that has lived in his stomach for an eternity, the sharp, icy dread of the unknown, is slowly melting away, replaced by a warm, golden anticipation. He closes his eyes, letting the soft, creaking lullaby of the wooden wagon carry him deeper into the comforting dark. The night wears on, holding the weary army in its protective embrace. The vast, indifferent sky of the steppe has been replaced by a familiar canopy of ancient trees, their branches reaching out like welcoming arms over the dirt road. Eventually, the soft murmur passes down the line, a gentle, whispered command to halt. They do not dig trenches tonight. They do not build desperate, hidden fires to ward off the freezing wind. They simply step off the road and into the soft, tall grass of a quiet meadow. The earth here is forgiving, rich, and fragrant. The men lie down together, pulling their greatcoats over their shoulders. They do not huddle in tight, terrified circles of shared body heat. They spread out, giving themselves permission to take up space in a world that no longer wants to swallow them. They lie on their backs, looking up at the silhouettes of the familiar trees swaying gently against the night sky. The air is so peaceful, so completely devoid of the heavy tension that has defined their lives for so long. The realization sets in, settling over the meadow like a soft, heavy blanket. The long journey is nearing its end. The dust of the summer, the freezing ash of the river, the blinding white of the blizzards, they are fading into the twilight of memory. The ghosts of the steppe are here with them, resting quietly in the tall grass, but they are no longer frightening. They are beautiful, melancholy companions, a testament to the unimaginable distances these men have crossed. The men of the Fourth Panzer Army breathe in the scent of the damp earth. They listen to the gentle rustling of the leaves and the distant, soothing murmur of the stream. And in the absolute safety of the familiar dark, they finally let go of the war. They close their heavy eyes, surrendering to a deep, dreamless sleep, wrapped in the quiet, enduring grace of a world that has finally welcomed them home. The great iron beasts finally closed their eyes, surrendering their heavy bones to the gentle, washing grace of the spring rain. It did not happen with a grand pronouncement, nor did it arrive with the dramatic blast of a bugle. The end came as a soft, collective exhalation, a slow releasing of a breath that had been held in the chest for thousands of miles. Across the rolling, green meadows of the west, the engines of the Fourth Panzer Army coughed, sputtered, and, one by one, fell into a profound, eternal silence. The turning of the wheels ceased. The grinding of the heavy steel tracks, a sound that had been the heartbeat of their lives for so many seasons, simply faded away into the damp air. When the last engine died, a strange, beautiful ringing filled the ears of the men. It was the sound of absolute stillness. For years, their world had been defined by motion, by the urgent, frantic need to push forward or the desperate, agonizing struggle to retreat. They had lived their lives in a state of perpetual momentum, chased by the dust, the snow, and the falling sky. But now, the momentum had simply evaporated. The road had run out. And then, the rain began to fall. It was a true spring rain, soft, silver, and incredibly gentle. It drifted down from a pale, pearlescent sky, falling like a benediction over the exhausted army. There was no wind to drive it, no biting frost to turn it to ice. It was just water, pure and clean, weeping quietly over the earth. The men did not seek shelter. They stood by the sides of the dirt roads and in the middle of the tall grass, turning their faces upward to the gray sky. They closed their eyes and let the cool droplets wash over their skin. The rain mingled with the deep layers of dust, the soot of ruined cities, and the heavy mud of the long march, washing it all away in slow, dark rivulets. It felt like an absolution. It felt as though the sky itself was trying to cleanse them, trying to gently wash away the heavy armor of the soldiers they had been forced to become. Look at the towering panzers, resting quietly in the wet grass. They are magnificent, tragic monuments to a forgotten time. Left completely alone, with their heavy steel hatches thrown wide open to the sky, they begin to surrender to the earth. The gentle rain falls upon the sloped armor, making a soft, rhythmic tapping sound, a soothing lullaby for the sleeping iron. The gray paint, already chipped and scarred by the long journey, is slick with the wet. Deep, vibrant patches of bright orange rust bloom across the steel like strange, beautiful spring flowers. The machines are no longer weapons. They are empty metal shells, giant husks left behind by creatures who have finally outgrown them. The wild green weeds are already beginning to push their way up through the spaces between the road wheels, softly claiming the iron back for the earth. A driver, a man who has lived inside the cramped, suffocating belly of his tank through the blinding heat and the freezing dark, stands beside the tracks. He reaches out, laying his bare hand flat against the wet, rusting metal. The steel is entirely cold. He strokes the armor, his touch lingering, filled with a deep, poetic melancholy. This machine was his shield. It held his fears, his whispered prayers, and the lingering scent of his meager rations. It carried him through the endless fields of sunflowers and the blinding blizzards of the deep east. He leans his forehead against the cold metal for one long, silent moment. He is saying a quiet, private goodbye to the ghost of his own endurance. He steps back, letting his hand fall to his side, and turns away, leaving the iron to the rain. All across the meadow, a profound and surreal unburdening is taking place. The men begin to dismantle the heavy architecture of their war. Thick, leather belts are unbuckled, slipping from tired waists to fall softly into the damp grass. Canvas harnesses, worn almost smooth by years of friction against weary shoulders, are unclasped and let go. Heavy steel helmets, the crowns they wore through the darkest storms, are taken off and placed gently on the flat fenders of abandoned trucks, left to gather small pools of rainwater in their brims. When the weight finally falls away, the men feel impossibly, wonderfully light. It is a physical sensation so intense that it makes them dizzy. Their shoulders, which have been hunched against the weight of their packs and the weight of the world, slowly begin to lower. They stand up straight, rolling their necks, feeling the cool rain seep into the thick wool of their unbuttoned tunics. To simply stop walking is a miracle they cannot quite comprehend. Their legs, trained by thousands of miles of relentless marching, tremble slightly, unsure of what to do with this sudden, beautiful stillness. Two soldiers, young men whose faces hold the deep, hollow weariness of old men, walk slowly toward the shelter of a wide-canopied elm tree. The thick, budding leaves above catch the worst of the rain, creating a soft, dry sanctuary at the base of the trunk. They sink down into the soft earth, their backs resting against the rough bark. They stretch their legs out in front of them, entirely ignoring the dampness of the ground. One of them reaches into his pocket and produces a crumpled, half-empty pack of cigarettes. He pulls one out. It is slightly bent and damp from the rain, but he places it between his lips with the reverence of a man handling spun gold. He strikes a match, shielding the tiny, flickering yellow flame with his cupped hands. He inhales, and the tip of the cigarette glows bright red in the gray afternoon. He exhales a long, slow plume of silver smoke, watching it drift upward and mingle with the falling rain. He passes the cigarette to his friend. They do not say a single word. There is no need for conversation. The shared silence is a heavy, comfortable blanket wrapped around them. They just sit there, smoking in the gentle gloom, watching the great iron machines rust in the meadow. They look at their own hands, resting loosely on their knees. These hands, which have dug freezing trenches and gripped cold rifles, are entirely still. They are just hands again. It is a quiet, staggering realization. They have survived. The storm has passed, and they have washed up on the shores of a quiet, rainy spring. In the back of a canvas-covered transport wagon, abandoned on the edge of the tree line, a soldier sits alone. The thick canvas roof above him drums softly with the rhythm of the rain, a deep, resonant, and incredibly peaceful sound. He has a small, leather-bound journal resting on his lap. He holds a short pencil, the wood chewed and splintered from nervous habit. He is writing a letter to his wife. But the tone of his words has entirely changed. The frantic, desperate longing of the winter retreats, the fearful, whispered goodbyes written in the tall summer grass, all of that is gone. His handwriting is slow, careful, and remarkably steady. My beautiful love, he writes, the graphite leaving soft, dark marks on the damp paper. The noise has finally stopped. We have left the great machines in the fields, and they are sleeping in the rain. I am sitting in the quiet, and for the first time in so long, I am not afraid of the sky. The weight has been lifted from my shoulders. He pauses, looking out through the opening of the canvas flap. He watches the silver sheets of rain sweeping across the green meadow, blurring the shapes of the abandoned panzers into soft, dark hills of iron. I unbuckled my harness today. I took off my helmet and let the rain wash my face. It feels like waking up from a very long, very dark dream. The world is so green here, and the air smells like wet earth and peace. I am just a man again. I am not a soldier anymore. I am only your husband, and I am finally coming home. Keep the kettle warm. I will be walking up the path before the leaves turn. He closes the journal, pressing his hand flat against the leather cover, sealing the promise inside. He leans his head back against the wooden slats of the wagon, closing his eyes, letting the sound of the rain wash through his mind, carrying away the last, lingering echoes of the long march. As the afternoon slowly surrenders to the evening, the light in the meadow turns a deep, bruised violet. The rain tapers off into a fine, suspended mist that hugs the ground, turning the world into a soft, ethereal dreamscape. The twilight of the iron has arrived. The silhouettes of the abandoned panzers and trucks grow darker, melting into the shadows of the approaching night. They belong to the past now, silent relics of a history that the men are quietly leaving behind. The rusted steel will remain here, a monument to their endurance, slowly sinking into the soft earth, year after year, until only the green grass remains. The men gather together in the gentle dusk. They do not form rigid lines or set sentries to watch the dark. They simply congregate in small, peaceful clusters, seeking the warmth of the friends who have walked beside them to the very edge of the world and back. They share whatever food they have left, passing tin cups of water and broken pieces of hard bread. They eat slowly, savoring the simple act of swallowing without the bitter taste of fear in their throats. They speak in hushed, reverent tones, not about the war, but about the future. They talk about the quiet, ordinary things they will do when they return. They talk about mending broken fences, walking down to the bakery in the morning light, and feeling the soft, clean sheets of a real bed. The night descends, heavy, dark, and perfectly safe. The mist settles over the meadow, a cool, soothing compress against their tired eyes. The men lie down in the damp grass, pulling their woolen blankets up over their shoulders. They do not huddle in terror. They stretch out, relaxing muscles that have been coiled as tight as wire for years. The earth beneath them is a gentle cradle, welcoming them back to the realm of the living. There are no engines roaring in the distance. There is no trembling in the soil. There is only the soft, rhythmic breathing of 1,000 men, the gentle dripping of water from the leaves, and the profound, beautiful quiet of a world that has finally found peace. They close their eyes, leaving the iron to the rust and the rain. And there, in the deep, sweet twilight, they drift into the purest, most healing slumber of their lives, dreaming only of the light, the quiet, and the long, beautiful walk home tomorrow. The war did not end with a sudden, triumphant shout. It ended with the soft, solitary sound of a single pair of boots walking down a quiet cobblestone street. The great, rolling tide of the Fourth Panzer Army has finally receded, dispersing like morning mist over a vast and quiet ocean. The endless, snaking columns of men and iron, the deafening roar of the engines, the blinding dust of the summer steppe, and the freezing, howling winds of the deep winter, all of it has dissolved into the silent pages of memory. There are no more lines to hold. There are no more rivers to cross. The thousands of miles of earth have been surrendered, and the men who walked them have been scattered to the wind, returning one by one to the lives they left behind so many seasons ago. Picture a man walking alone in the late afternoon light. He wears a faded coat, stripped of its insignias and heavy canvas webbing. His shoulders, which have carried the unbearable weight of the world, are slightly bowed, permanently curved by the long, heavy walk home. He moves slowly, with a hesitant, almost fragile grace. The dirt road beneath his feet has turned to cobblestone, and the vast, terrifying horizon of the east has been replaced by the gentle, familiar silhouettes of sloping slate roofs and quiet, smoking chimneys. He is no longer a soldier. He is a ghost returning to a world that has kept on turning without him. The air here does not smell of cordite or burning ruins. It smells of damp earth, blooming lilac, and the faint, sweet aroma of wood smoke drifting from a nearby bakery. Every step he takes feels impossibly light. For years, the comforting, heavy weight of his rifle was an extension of his own arm. Its absence now leaves him feeling strangely untethered, floating through a peaceful dream he is almost afraid to touch, lest it shatter like thin glass. He stops before a small wooden gate. The paint is peeling, weathered by the sun and the rain. Beyond the gate is a narrow garden path, and at the end of the path is a door. It is the very door he has closed his eyes and visualized 1,000 times in the dark cellars of shattered cities, and beneath the freezing canvas of snow-covered trenches. He raises a trembling hand and rests it against the wood of the gate. He does not push it open immediately. A profound, quiet fear washes over him. Who is the man returning to this house? He is not the bright-eyed, innocent boy who left. He carries the heavy, invisible burden of the endless plains. He carries the echoes of the artillery, the memory of the frozen birch woods, and the faces of the brothers he had to leave behind in the snow. He wonders, with a heartbreaking vulnerability, if there is still a place for him in this gentle, sunlit world. He takes a deep breath, filling his lungs with the sweet, peaceful air, and opens the gate. When the front door opens, there are no grand speeches. The woman standing in the hallway drops a woven basket of laundry to the floor. The sound of it falling is the only noise in the sudden, ringing quiet. She covers her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide, welling with a sudden, overwhelming flood of tears. They collide in the narrow hallway, a desperate, crushing embrace that tries to squeeze out all the lost years and the miles of separation. He buries his face in her shoulder, breathing in the scent of lavender soap and clean linen. He closes his eyes, and for the first time since the march began, he lets his emotional armor shatter completely. He weeps. They are quiet, heavy tears of absolute exhaustion and profound, disbelieving relief. He has finally stopped walking. He is safe. But the return is not a simple crossing of a threshold. Healing from the vastness of the steppe is a slow, deeply quiet journey of the soul. Later that evening, he sits at a small wooden table in the kitchen. A porcelain teacup rests in front of him. He wraps his rough, calloused hands around the delicate cup, marveling at how fragile it feels, how smooth and perfect the glazed surface is. The kitchen is perfectly still. The only sound is the rhythmic, steady ticking of a tall grandfather clock in the corner. He listens to that ticking, mesmerized by its steady, peaceful promise. It is not counting down to a march. It is not measuring the time until the freezing dawn. It is simply keeping the heartbeat of a safe, quiet home. He watches the golden light of the oil lamp reflect on the surface of his tea. It is a moment of ordinary magic, a tiny, everyday miracle that he had prayed for in the darkest corners of the earth. Yet, when the night falls and the house goes dark, the echoes of the east return to claim their due. He lies in a soft bed, covered in clean, heavy quilts. But sleep does not come easily. The mattress feels too soft, the room too warm, the silence too absolute. In the pitch black, his mind drifts back to the snow. He hears the phantom howling of the winter wind rattling the window panes. He reaches out his arm, instinctively seeking the warm, wool-clad shoulder of his brother, the young corporal who used to sleep beside him in the trenches to keep the frost away. His hand finds only the empty air. A heavy, poetic sorrow settles over him. It is the quiet survivor's guilt, the profound, unanswerable question of why he was allowed to walk back into the light while so many good, brave men remained in the dark. He stares up at the ceiling, feeling the immense weight of their memories pressing down upon his chest. Then, in the dark, a soft, warm hand reaches out and gently covers his own. His wife intertwines her fingers with his. She does not ask him where his mind has gone, she simply anchors him to the present. She holds his hand, offering a silent, unwavering promise that she will sit with him in the dark, holding the ghosts at bay, until the morning comes. He turns his head, resting his cheek against the pillow, and slowly, finally, lets the peaceful rhythm of her breathing lull him to sleep. As the weeks turn into months, and the months into years, the men of the Fourth Panzer Army slowly learn how to live again. They put away the tattered remnants of their uniforms in dusty attics and dark cedar chests. They return to the fields, to the factories, to the quiet shops on the corners of cobblestone streets. Their heroism is no longer measured in miles marched or cold endured. It is measured in the quiet, everyday resilience of building a life after the end of the world. Watch the older man, whose hands were once stained with the dark grease of heavy Panzer engines, kneeling in the soft dirt of his backyard garden. He is using a small trowel to turn the earth, preparing the soil for the spring planting. He handles the dirt with a gentle, reverent touch. For so long, the earth was his enemy. It was the suffocating mud that pulled at his boots, the frozen rock that he had to carve with a bayonet just to find shelter. But now, he has forgiven the earth. He presses tiny, fragile seeds into the loam, covering them with a soft layer of soil. He waters them carefully from a tin can. He is coaxing life from the ground, nurturing it with the same hands that once gripped iron and steel. It is a profound, beautiful act of redemption. When the first green shoots push their way through the soil, reaching for the sun, he smiles. It is a slow, deeply peaceful smile that touches the very corners of his tired eyes. In a quiet parlor across town, another man opens a small wooden box resting on a writing desk. Inside, wrapped in a piece of faded, oiled cloth, is a stack of letters. The paper is yellowed, the edges worn soft and fragile as ancient parchment. The ink is faded, blurred in places by drops of rain and melted snow. He takes the top letter and unfolds it with agonizing care. It is a letter he wrote in the deep, blinding fields of summer sunflowers, a desperate, poetic attempt to send his love across thousands of miles of dust. He reads the words he wrote when he was just a frightened boy, sitting in the shadow of a rusting machine. He realizes now that it was not the iron, or the orders, or the grand sweep of history that carried him home. It was the love pressed into these small, folded squares of paper. It was the memories of warm hearths, the shared cigarettes in the dark cellars, the whispered prayers, and the profound, unbreakable brotherhood of the men who walked beside him. He traces the faded ink with his thumb, whispering a quiet word of thanks to the boy he used to be, and to the men who did not make it back. And what of the great steppe, the vast, terrifying canvas upon which their tragedy was painted? Far away, beneath the endless, shifting skies of the east, the earth has reclaimed its quiet dominance. The deep trenches have collapsed, filling with soft dirt and the wandering roots of the wild grass. The great, towering panzers, left behind in the final days of the retreat, are slowly dissolving into the landscape. They are heavy, sleeping monuments of rusted orange and dull brown, completely swallowed by the tall, green stalks of the summer. The birds build their delicate nests in the silent barrels of the guns, and the wild vines wrap their gentle fingers around the cold steel tracks. The wind blows across the plains, an endless, sweeping sigh that travels from horizon to horizon. It rustles the golden heads of the sunflowers and whispers through the pale, ghostly trunks of the birch woods. It is a peaceful, ancient song, washing away the scars of the past, leaving only the enduring, beautiful quiet of the natural world. The long walk home is finally over. The shadows have gathered, the dust has settled, and the iron has gone to sleep. The story of the Fourth Panzer Army fades into the twilight, leaving behind not a legacy of machines, but a profound testament to the fragile, unbreakable resilience of the human heart. There were men who walked to the very edge of the earth and back, carrying their love, their fears, and their shared humanity through the darkest storms. And now, as the night falls over the quiet towns and the peaceful gardens, they rest. They sleep beneath the soft, familiar stars, held safe by the gentle breathing of the ones they love, finding a solemn, beautiful closure in the enduring quiet of the peaceful night. The embers have faded, the dawn has come, and the weary travelers have finally, truly, found their way home.